Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for braving the elements. Looks like we're going to have a good crowd today. Obviously, the crowd is going to trickle in as we go. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Tom Reed. I'm the director of the Office of Communications Business Opportunities, which is a policy office here at the FCC that focuses on small business, women and minority-owned business interests. So part of our role is advocacy within the agency to make sure that the agency does no harm with respect to the opportunities of small businesses and women and minority-owned businesses. The other part of it is what you're seeing here today, our outreach mission, which is to be as innovative as we can to sort of make sure that the FCC is a stakeholder in the creation of opportunities in the private sector. So that's what we're trying to do here today. We're trying to make sure that we can bring all interested parties together to make sure that those of you who are innovating are meeting the individuals that are trying to help launch new businesses, that are investing in new businesses. And so today we're going to have a number of discussions about that very thing. The genesis of this event was a conversation that Chairman Wheeler had with Congressman Bobby Rush, which was how do we showcase new talent in this arena? And as the request was made of me, I said, well, we can showcase new talent, but we also need to have a conversation about who's investing in new talent. And if they're not investing, which is often the case, why not? So that's part of the discussion that we're going to have today. I think it's going to be really interesting and engaging. So I just wanted to introduce that bit. I think everybody has the agenda. We're going to have a couple panel discussions. The first one is going to be on early stage investment. We're going to ask those individuals to come up soon. Alonzo Lorenz is going to be moderating that conversation. He's been gracious enough to do that for us, so we're excited to have him here. He's written the MBE's guide on raising capital, so he's got long legs in this area, so we're grateful to have him. Right now, though, we have with us Commissioner Mignon Clyburn, who would like to address you as well. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you, Tom, and good morning, everyone. Oh, I know we've got some challenges this morning, but we can do better than that. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I know you braved this storm, so congratulations. You deserve an A just for that. But this conference designed for entrepreneurs. So really, honestly, I am not surprised by this great attendance today. If entrepreneurs are anything, they're intrepid, undaunted by obstacles that would trip up lesser individuals. So a little frozen precipitation from the sky and on the ground, forget about it. You were going to be here. That was not going to stop you from learning from great speakers, networking, and pitching your company to prospective partners or funders. Tom Reed, once again, you're to be commended for organizing yet another timely and important event. You have a really robust schedule ahead today, but I would like to leave you with 3 key thoughts: innovation, the Internet of Everything, and investment. Analysts, social scientists, and experts all agree that as a society and as a culture, we have shifted from what was once called the information age to the innovation age. This age requires creative and design thinking, problem solving, solution creation, intrapreneurship, idea execution, and entrepreneurship. And all of this time makes engineering, innovation, is available to all of us at lower cost and with fewer difficulties. This shift has been bolstered by what we call the knowledge economy, with more companies relying on open models to take advantage of readily available thinking. Disruption is the order of the day. It exacts a great reward in the market and gives good things to consumers and users. William Weldon, the chairman of Johnson & Johnson, said, "Innovation is no longer about money. It's about the climate." Are individuals allowed to flourish and take risk, he asked? And you, I believe, know the answer. And Robert Friedel, a leading expert on innovation, has pointed out, technology and the pursuit of improvement are ultimate expressions of freedom, of the capacity of humans to reject the limitations of the past their experiences, and to transcend the boundaries of their biological capabilities and their social traditions. He points out how countless small efforts by individuals from all walks of life contribute to the astonishing advances that we enjoy today, and 4 billion digital natives who were born between 1980 and 2012, and that obviously leaves me out, intuitively understand global connection and innovation, and is bringing about new and exciting perspectives to replace the industrial age thinking of the past. And the innovation age will be characterized by the capacity of every single person to learn, grow, and make a difference for their families, their communities, and the world. What a tremendous opportunity for the leaders and innovators in this room and beyond. But we must keep things in perspective. Many innovations, we know, die on the drawing board. They may be too ambitious, too thinly capitalized, or poorly conceived. The bottom line is that many actually fail. And even successful innovations cannot escape failure. They create widespread failure among the competition and ultimately fail when they're surpassed by better ideas. That means that your best idea, the one that solves the biggest problem of today, may not be the one that lasts the duration of your career. At the same time, however, neither will any missteps that you may make along the way. Oprah Winfrey famously said, "When I look into the future, it is so bright it burns my eyes." Indeed, we are filled with a world of opportunity, and I'm encouraged that you continue to embrace it and push the limits. The Internet of Everything has already connected people throughout the world, but the Internet of Things aims to take the next step by connecting the world's devices, buildings, and objects. IoT can be defined as a network of Internet-connected devices that may be monitored or controlled remotely using a computer device. The Internet of Things will be the largest device market in the world. Estimates are by 2019, there will be 23.3 billion IoT devices connected to the Internet, resulting in $1.7 trillion being added to the global economy. This expansion is driven by 4 main factors: the spread of Internet connectivity, the high adoption of smartphone tablets that control the Internet of Everything, large-scale IoT investments, and declining costs of Internet-connected sensors. The bottom line is this. This represents the next major step in Internet innovation by connecting everyday devices and objects and enabling control by all of us. I could recite to you this morning a slew of figures that you already know. But remember this. You are finding ways to get into the game in a very big way, and all of us are the beneficiary. But I don't have to tell you today that the fuel for all of this is capital. So you will hear today from experts that even though access to capital remains one of the key obstacles for small and minority entrepreneurs, we will never stop trying to eliminate those unnecessary barriers when it comes to financing. So while I am unable to share a full day with you, I want to thank all of you for coming out today, for not listening to the weather prognosticators, because today will be successful, it will be rewarding, and it will be profitable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think you neglected to mention you were born in 78, right? So you just missed that cutoff. We're fortunate today, thank you very much. We're fortunate today to have Commissioner Michael Riley with us, and he'd also like to address you this morning.
I thought we had rules on talking about someone's age. Well, I want to thank you. I want to first thank everybody. I had an opportunity to walk around most of the room and talk to a number of folks. I really appreciate the opportunity. A couple of different sites that I've got a site to order food in my neighborhood. I've got some information on location accuracy. I just really appreciate the conversation, everyone's frank discussion with me. There's a couple of target markets I may not be perfect for. Social girls is outside my market, but that's okay. I have only a very few comments. I had anticipated talking about a little bit about policy, but I'm just going to keep it to highbrow today. And I want a special thanks to Tom Reed for having me and setting up this event. Here's what I do know. Small businesses are a vital part of our economy, including the technology sector, as they account for the vast number of jobs created in the last few years. I had the opportunity to witness the innovation coming out of a number of startups when I was at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas earlier this month. I'm always struck by the entrepreneurial spirit of small companies present at CES and by the fact that so many products will never make it to market. I understand that today's event will highlight innovation, success stories, and lessons learned, but also discuss challenges faced by small businesses, especially in the telecommunications sphere. I would like to focus on one of those challenges today, FCC regulations that unnecessarily add burdens and costs. As your companies strive to break into the marketplace, work to compete, roll out service to your consumers, FCC regulations may not be at the forefront of your thinking. That's probably an okay idea. But increasingly, companies of all types and sizes have to consider the impact of FCC rules on their business models and bottom lines. The reason is that the Commission has begun a process for a more hands-on approach to regulating. It's an attempt to expand itself beyond its traditional purview and jurisdiction. As a result, more companies have to spend time and resources monitoring or thinking about FCC proceedings. And the companies not used to dealing with Washington, that can come as a real culture shock. I appreciate Tom's intro when he said, do no harm, Hippocratic oath. That's important to me in terms of what we do here at the Commission and what burdens that we place onto your business model. Some parties have highlighted over the years, and especially in the last 6 months, the deficiencies in the Commission's initial Regulatory Flexibility Act analysis. And I certainly would agree with that. There are flaws that we do, and there are greater work we need to do to understand what the impact is on our decisions on your businesses, the things that you're trying to bring to marketplace, the innovation you're trying to startle consumers, whether it be business or individual consumers themselves. Last point I will leave you with, and that is that I know you are going to listen to a number of roundtables today and a number of panels and talk about how to raise funding and how to interact and grow your business. But keep in mind, going forward, how that all interplays with what we do here, so you're not caught as a surprise down the road. And as you grow, and hopefully, next year or in multiple years, this room will be even bigger, and the number of people we'll be able to demonstrate will be even larger, and we'll have more insight into what you're able to do. So I want to thank you so much. I know the chairman's going to talk at some point today. I look forward to his. I'm not able to spend the whole day here, but I will watch it in my office and watch all the good comments that are coming. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner. A couple of announcements. We're probably going to give Chairman Wheeler a few minutes to come down. I think he's in a closed meeting, and I know he wants to talk to you as well. But a couple of announcements, some brief announcements. As we're going through the panel discussions, some of my staff, we won't have an open mic, but some of my staff will be coming around with index cards. So if you have questions for our panelists, please do write them down, identify yourselves, write legibly, and we'll try to work your questions in. They're also going to be we're streaming live, so we're also going to be receiving questions from the internet, and I think that's our WebEx, and it's event number 992-476526. Again, 992-476526. If you want to tweet about our event, it's hashtag FCC Tech Fair. In the afternoon, as you all know, we're going to have our Fast Pitch program. So many of you, I'm not sure if you've received your schedules yet. If you haven't, please do check in with Karen Beverly. We'll make sure that she's available to give you your schedule. The Fast Pitch portion of our day is going to start at 2:30, so there's plenty of time, and I'm sure Karen will be checking in with you to make sure that you have your schedule. So other than that, We're going to take a brief break and give Chairman Wheeler an opportunity to come down, but we'll probably get started. We'll probably get started in another 5 or 10 minutes. If you haven't had an opportunity, there are refreshments right down the hall, and we'll reconvene at 9:45. Okay? Thank you. All right, everyone, we're gonna reconvene. The Chairman Wheeler has been gracious enough to join us, so if we could take our seats, we'll continue with the program. Chairman Wheeler, who has been a champion of the open internet, which is obviously something that many of our businesses here need. So we're glad to have him here. And Chairman Wheeler, please.
I was having too much fun.
I know you were. Good to see you.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you, everybody, for coming. Michael Cunningham just gave me a copy of his book about crowdfunding. And so which leads me to kind of think about you all and why you're here and what hopefully we'll be able to accomplish today. I had to start out by saying thank you to Congressman Bobby Rush, because today, I love it when the wireless devices that we oversee go off. It's a sign of success. So whose phone is this up here? You got a call. Should I ring to them who it is? You guys want to know who's calling? But this whole idea started when Sarah Morris, who's our Director of Legislative Affairs, and I were sitting with Congressman Bobby Rush one day, and he said, what can you do to help startups? And I said, hey, Congressman, we're the technology agency of the federal government. And I've personally been down the road as both a startup entrepreneur and a venture capitalist supporting entrepreneurs. And so you've come to the right place for this idea. So we start today with thanking Congressman Bobby Rush for his idea. I also would want to say right here at the outset that this is why we're fighting for an open internet. Because the most important network in the history of mankind is the internet. It creates the opportunity for all these things that we're seeing around here. It creates the opportunity for Michael's book and the ideas about how you have crowdfunding. You can't have crowdfunding if you can't build the crowd. And so that's why we are incredibly pro open internet and proactive. And a month from today, we'll be sitting right here voting on an open internet item. You're going to hear from Commissioner Clyburn and Commissioner O'Reilly. So I'll eschew, as they say, it's a word I keep using recently. I will avoid talking about the commission other than to make the big plug for open internet. But I'd like to relate to you as an entrepreneur and a venture capitalist. I know what you do is hard. She's sitting there nodding her head. It's not just hard, it's damn hard. I've been there. It takes a very special person to be able to step off the edge and take a risk. A really special person. That most people who look at entrepreneurs, look at the end result. They don't think about how tough it is. at the start to step off the curb, and how tough it is to keep going along the way. I know that raising capital is hard, even if you follow Michael's suggestions. Again, I've sat on one side of the table asking for money, and I've sat on the other side of the table with the money. It's more fun to be on the money side of the table. Okay? It's tough to be an entrepreneur. But the problem is, success is even harder. All of you know the statistics. You know, I'm standing here. I've had companies shot out from under me. But that's what makes the kinds of things that we're talking about here today important, because success comes from your ability to expand the whole. Success comes from the ability to look outside, see and seize new opportunities. I spent a lot of time at one point in time in my career as a VC investing in Europe. And I walked away from it because there are two things that are special about this country and the entrepreneurial attitude that enables success in this country. One is the willingness to take risk, which is about as American as you can get. And is interestingly something that has not necessarily been exported to other parts of the world where the emphasis is more on security. The other thing, however, that was different is the celebration of failure. And I hate to stand here in front of a group of entrepreneurs with great companies and great futures and talk about failure. But it's one of the great things that we've got, and the way in which we embrace failure, not as the end, but as a new opportunity. I mean, we can all go right down the list of, quote, overnight successes in the IP world, Internet Protocol world, and identify how, well, this had to switch from this business model to this business model because it was failing. This had to evolve over here because it was failing. Nothing starts out the way you planned it. And sometimes it even means, okay, we're shutting the doors, and then somebody comes back around and says, I know what I did wrong last time. I'm going to do it right this time. Failure is one of the great things about capitalism. Failure is one of the great things about this country. Our job here at the Commission is to see if we can help you avoid experiencing it, however. Because we are, as I said at the outset, we are the technology agency of the federal government. The capability that knits everything that you do together is the Internet. And the Internet flows through, Internet policy flows through this agency. And again, so I'll end with where I started. That the key to growth and success is an open Internet. Is an Internet that successfully creates opportunity rather than selectively determining winners and losers. That's what we're fighting for. We're doing it because of innovators like you. We want to provide the kind of stability that I know that as a VC, I looked to see, is there the capability, is there access, is there the opportunity, are there things that could preclude this company from getting access to the critical mass that it needs? So anyway, I'm really grateful that you're here. I'm grateful to Congressman Bobby Rush for suggesting this. Tom Reed, thank you to you for your leadership in all of this. And Michael, thank you for your book. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Right now, we'll ask our first panel to come up, and we're going to get started with the day. So, on our first panel, we have moderating Alonzo Lorenz, and we'll have give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves. Oh, thank you. Oh, wait, I had that. Alonzo, the podium is yours, and you can get started whenever you come.
All right, good deal. Thank you. Morning. Everybody settled in? All right, good deal. Who was that at the end? Well, hope everyone is doing well this morning. My name is Alonzo Lorenz, and I'm here via Atlanta. I was able to make it through the snow and the rain and electrical fire on my airplane, so I'm really happy to be here. But let me begin by thanking the Federal Communications Commission for hosting this event, Chairman Wheeler, for your leadership, net neutrality, and for having the vision to host this important event, this very important event, and also to Mr. Reed for your leadership in organizing this. This is very important. I'm excited. I'm very excited, in fact. I'm excited for a few reasons. First, I'm excited because I have a little magnetic name tag. It doesn't flip all around, so I appreciate that. Speaking at a lot of these panels, that tends to happen, so that's first. Second, for the weather, that it cooperated and everyone was able to make it here safely, I anticipate or hope, and that I'll be able to make it out on my flight back to Atlanta tonight. That's second. But most importantly, for this event, as someone that is in the trenches, as a corporate transactional attorney trying to assist clients in their efforts to raise capital, it's hard, as Chairman Wheeler pointed out, as you guys know. It's very hard. But there is good news. One is there is an emphasis now on acknowledging the importance and the lack of access for some as it relates to capital. And this is what this conference is intended to do, and this great panel is going to share with us, so I'm going to be short. The last thing I'll say is typically when I speak at panels or at conferences and access to capital is an issue, you typically, two things I notice. First is there will be other sessions taking place. There will be access to capital. There will be contracts or something else. And the access to capital group is the least attended. I find that interesting first. And second is typically you have two banks and then me, the equity guy, right in the middle. And all the questions go to the banks. But today we're going to focus on both, because neither is more important than the other. And that's what's unique about this panel. And we'll begin. We have an hour, so we're going to go straight into it. And as you guys go through, you can share a little bit about your respective entities, and we'll go from there. Well, let me begin with the first question to Tony Thomas and John May. Can you describe what you consider to be sort of your ideal investee company? What sort of sectors you look at? Whether they be early stage, seed stage, late growth stage, what are the things you guys sort of look for in terms of your perfect investee company?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. My name is Tony Thomas. I'm with SCI Ventures. I've been a venture capitalist for the last about 20 years, primarily investing in early stage media and communications companies. So for us, an ideal company, an ideal sector for us, again, is media, communications, technology. My firm has been around since 1977, and it started out backing minority entrepreneurs that were investing or building companies in the communication space. So we spent a lot of time here at the FCC having invested in radio, television, cable, infrastructure along the way. And so that's sort of my background, but as you can imagine, communications is largely a technology business these days. And so everything from digital media companies, ad tech companies, to communications assets we're very interested in. And we're we're going back to our roots, which is infrastructure. And so for us, all of us have tablets, we have computers, we have phones. In order to see the growth in probably a lot of the businesses that you all are creating, you need infrastructure, whether it's the communications towers, and we're looking at communication tower deals that we like, and whether it is data centers. So if you have a content play, and many of you know that data centers and being able to outsource the capability of having the cloud at your access is very important to your business. And so we're actually investing in that physical building where the servers reside, where the fibers come into, and so on. So for us, it's very narrow as it relates to media communications, but early stage, and in some instances, we'll take on turnaround opportunities where you really have to have that early stage focus to re-establish a new business, an existing business that may have failed at some point in time.
For those early stage companies, how much do you typically seek to invest in those companies?
So for us, it ranges, and I'll just give you examples of deals that are currently on our table that we feel good about. And they range anywhere from about $150,000 to $200,000, which is very small. And the beauty of technology today, I think that many of you are experiencing, it doesn't take that much to develop software businesses today and to start companies. The cost is a lot less than it was even 10 years ago. But then we're also looking at, for example, the data center business or the tower business. We're working on a financing now for one of our companies, and we signed about a $130 million term sheet. So it varies quite widely. In terms for us, again, it's that early $250,000, $100,000 that we can participate in, and then we have access through our relationships to larger sums of capital.
Fantastic. All right, that's sort of an outlook from the equity side. Let's shift over to the debt side. So Terrence and Mark, can you guys share what factors you guys look at, both for your investors and for yourselves, in terms of what you look at as far as securitization, credit analysis, credit worthiness, issues like that? What do you guys look at in analyzing and determining whether there are viable investment opportunities out there on the debt side?
Well, I mean, I'm here largely because we've established something spearheaded by Pamela Thomas Graham, who's an executive board member at Credit Suisse. And if you don't know who Credit Suisse is, we're a large global bank with major operations in the United States, mostly focused on investment banking and private banking and wealth management. But Pamela Thomas Graham has spearheaded something we call New Markets, and it's our foray into sort of sustaining and building wealth in the African American community, the LGBT community, and the community of women. And out of that has grown something called the Entrepreneur Circle. And what we're doing is essentially providing the second stage debt financing for companies that we've chosen because they have an established record. They've gotten some early stage financing, and we're going to sort of surround them with a community of other entrepreneurs that we think could be helpful. They can share ideas, and we'll surround them with our community of experts, and also take them through our culture of rigor. So, we want this effort to be successful. So essentially, what we're doing is making sure they go through all the rigor standards that any other company and or investment we might take on goes through. So, we're looking at, high growth areas like tech and real estate, and just trying to make sure that we nurture the funding that we provide. In our case, it'll be debt funding in the 6 to 7 figures, depending on whether or not we believe the business will be viable. And again, it is for a large bank, a large global bank like Credit Suisse, it's a new foray. We want it to be successful because we want others to follow us into these communities, African American communities and other sort of diverse communities that have not been focused on by major banks. So we want to make sure the efforts are successful so that others will follow.
Okay.
So I have some good news and some bad news for you as entrepreneurs. The good news is it is less expensive than ever to start a business. The bad news is that to obtain those smaller amounts of capital, especially debt capital, is actually more difficult than ever. In wake of the financial crisis, there have been some regulations passed, and appropriately so, that make it very difficult for banks to lend in smaller amounts. It costs banks the same to underwrite a $50K loan as it does a $2 million loan, and so they simply stick to those larger loans. I'm an entrepreneur myself, established a company called Street Shares. Media describes us as Shark Tank meets eBay, and it's a fairly apt description. So entrepreneurs and small business owners come on Street Shares, they pitch for a small business loan, and then our investors compete to lend to them. We consolidate all the smallest bids into a single loan for that entrepreneur. We do loans right now up to $50K. We will eventually go up to $100K. But we focus on those smaller loans to newer companies. We are, in essence, the provider of your first working capital loan.
Can you share a little bit about the terms of your loan packages? And repayment, duration, interest rates, things of that nature?
Duration, and again, you know, the interest rate hasn't been set, just depends on sort of the rigor that the bank takes. Mm-hmm. The duration will be anywhere from 2 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. And the idea being that we're going to choose the companies we think will be most successful, providing the funding and the expertise to help them grow. Mm-hmm. And I mean, ultimately, what we want is to grow successful businesses so that we can make them larger loans. You know, it's what we do. So I think that might answer your question.
Sure.
And Street Shares is 1 and 3 year term loans, fully amortizing, unsecured with a personal guarantee.
And unsecured. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm sure there were a lot of nodding heads there. All right. I just happened to notice on my way here, I was reading Time Magazine talking about equity, and there's actually an article in February's edition of Time Magazine. It says, something ventured, new startups are being primed by a major boom in funding. So once again, there is ample evidence. So if you haven't read this article, I would encourage you to read it. Basically, it talks about how Silicon Valley is even looking at early stage companies to stay ahead of the game, and it emphasizes particular areas, many of which are in this room today. So if you haven't had a chance to read it, I encourage you to read it. A new and very, speaking of sort of innovative, but based upon the Jobs Act, as we all know, there is this opportunity for crowdfunding. And as we also know, there have been some good things and some bad things, more from the timing perspective, we'll say, and I won't say bad, but it's not where it's supposed to be. Can you talk about crowdfunding, Bill, in terms of what it entails, what your community looks for, and what they expect in terms of returns?
Well, thank you, for holding this event. I want to thank the chairman for plugging my book 4 times. Y'all see that? I mean, that was just, you can't pay for that. Crowdfunding is open source financing. Everybody here as technology professionals are aware of open source software. It's exactly the same thing. Now, crowdfunding was created because of the failure of traditional financial institutions, all due respect to this panel, this is a great panel, this is probably one of the best panels I've been on, to deal with the actual issue of getting capital to black people. What do I mean by that? I mean 1% of venture capital goes to African Americans. I have the numbers here from the SBA 7A program. These are on SBA.gov, by the way, and I encourage you to get that. Fiscal year 2015, the total program, $5.8 billion. The amount that went to African Americans, $105 million. All right, that's basically about 2%. So, if you buy, and I'm a Chicago school economist, trained free market, all of that, I get it, The only way to justify these numbers is if you're saying that out of $5 billion in lending, black people only had 2% of the good ideas. Now, my experience over the past 20 years, and I launched my first website, creativeinvest.com, on November 16th, 1995. Okay, so I've been out there for a while doing this. My experience is that that's incorrect. I had one guy who, real quick example, I'll make this quick, okay? This guy thought about a Lionel train set. You know those train sets that run on the floor? He was in bed one night and he thought, well, hey, if I take that train set, he was thinking about a problem he had with a relative, and if I put that train set on the ceiling, I could attach a harness to it and move a disabled person around an environment, a room, a nursing home, something like that, right? Brilliant. Brilliant. And I see this stuff all of the time. Stacy Wisenon, go pay your tuition. Crowdfunding, 20% of your student loan, having a bank come in and pay the 80%, right? Brilliant. Brilliant. I mean, again, I get all of this, but then I look at these numbers and I see 2%, and these are the good guys, right? This is the capital allocation that's higher than the private sector. You know, higher than the 1% that goes to the private sector, through the private sector. So crowdfunding is a way to surface these new ideas, these innovations, this creativity that exists in all communities. And I would say, now I'm going to say something a little controversial here, I want to warn you. I would say that there's probably a little more innovation and creativity in the black community, the black entrepreneur community, mainly because of the lack of access to capital. The way to think about it is like this, and you know, this is all Chicago School economics, right? If you have access to capital, then all of the ideas get selected and tried if you're in a non-minority situation, right? But if you don't have access to capital, there are a bunch of good ideas that are stuck in that silo. So that's what I mean. I'm not, making a racist statement. That's what I mean when I say there are probably more good ideas in that African American silo because of the lack of supply of capital. So crowdfunding is a way, what we're seeing is crowdfunding is a way to tap into that silo, bring those ideas to the forefront. And we're seeing everybody use it. There was a guy from Text to Them. He mentioned he did 4 crowdfunding campaigns, worked with people on 4 crowdfunding campaigns. We're seeing this, and we're seeing just great, great ideas. Last thing, these ideas are not going to get funded by the venture capital guys. Again, all due respect, they're not going to get funded by Credit Suisse. They just aren't, If they were going to, they would have already, all right? They're going to get funded by you. They're going to get funded by you $100 at a time. DC now allows $2 million in equity crowdfunding to be raised, okay? So we're seeing massive, last example, Melvin Deal. Anybody know who Melvin Deal is? Melvin Deal is the guy, there you go, thank you, Kwame. Kwame is my intern from Howard University. Melvin Deal brought African dance to the United States of America in 1960 in Shaw, Washington, D.C. He was the first guy to do it. When he tried to do it, they said, African dance, it's gross. There's no value there. He said no, and the reason I'm bringing him up, this is an example of the type of innovation and creativity that is historically resident in our community, all right? This guy said, no. If you look at it, there's a lot of art in African dance. He brought the first African dance company to the United States of America. All right? He can't get funding, right? Where's he going to go? He's going to go to this guy? He's going to go to Credit Suisse? No, I don't think so. He's going to go to you. He's going to go to you with his expertise. He got gentrified out of his building on Benning Road, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to put together a crowdfunding campaign to get this guy $1 million building somewhere in D.C., so that he can run his African dance theater and troupe. The return to the investors is going to be a participation in the ownership of that building. All right? He's just going to use it. He's going to have the lease. He's going to have the ownership. But you're going to participate when the building value appreciates. This is the type of innovation that we're pushing forward on. There are a bunch of other things that we're doing. I mean, just a bunch. Which, again, I don't want to take up all the time, but that's an example of kind of where we are, what we're seeing, why this tool is so powerful. And really, last thing, once you surface the innovation, these guys will come in, Pebble Watch, created the smartwatch category, $10 million on Kickstarter that they raised, okay? These guys will come in, with GE, AT&T, Stacy, right? AT&T said that they have an internal crowdsourcing program where they're surfacing and funding ideas. You're going to see this happen over and over and over again. So it's a great tool. It's one that you as entrepreneurs need to understand and need to be familiar, even if you don't use it. You simply need to be familiar with it. So that's all I have to say.
That's all right. Appreciate it. All right. Well, one of my favorite areas, and one of the areas that I think is least, and I have some follow-up questions for you. And there are a lot of misconceptions, a lot of misunderstanding in terms of where crowdfunding is, what it can and can't do. So we'll follow up on that in a minute. But in terms of being on both sides of the equation, that is being the funder and the source of potential capital, the SBA is unique from that particular perspective. One is you have the SBIC programs and you have the SBIR, on and on. Javier, can you talk about those respective programs and how that plays out with respect to an audience today?
First thing I'll say is who questions Billy's enthusiasm in this crowd? It's not easy to follow that kind of enthusiasm. I want to take the plane up to 35,000 feet for a second. There are some real issues. Less than 1/20th of the venture capital in the United States, less than 1/20% of the startups in the United States get professionally managed venture capital money. There's another 0.9% of those startups that get angel money, and by angel I mean organized angel groups. So I'm sure none of you here is math challenged. That's less than 1% of all the startups in the United States of America actually get institutional money. Those gaps become a lot more pronounced when you talk about underserved groups, and that could be African Americans, that could be rural white America, that could be, you can cut that all kinds of ways. Why is it that with the technology we have now, that with the potential democratization of the access to capital that Title III of the Jobs Act potentially offers, why is it that those gems are not being found? And there's a lot of reasons for that. I agreed a lot with the two commissioners and the chairman of the FCC talking about this game is all about risk. So if you're an entrepreneur, it's all about taking the risk. If you're an investor, it's all about minimizing the risk. But the same equalizing thing happens. When those two things meet, capital meets idea. I'm very happy to be here. I'm the associate administrator of the SBA, and I run an office called the Office of Investment and Innovation. One of the programs which you mentioned is called the SBIC program. It's basically a collection of venture capital, private equity, and structured lending funds that invest in small businesses in America. I know you mentioned the 7A loan programs. That's kind of on the debt side of the house. We have the same issues in SBIC. Those gaps are very pronounced. So how do we get more money flowing? One potential way of doing that is making sure that the money managers, the people that hold the purse strings, are also representative of what America looks like. Because in reality, a lot of the finance game, it's like for like. I'm not going to say you're going to hire a mini-me or you're going to invest in a mini-me, but if you are from an underserved group, you're probably going to be more likely to look at that when you look at the overall investment situation. SBIC manages about $23.5 billion. It's about 300 funds. We're looking to grow the ranks on the early stage side of the house. Two other programs that are very relevant to what you guys do here, SBIR and STTR, which stands for Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer. The United States of America this year is going to spend $135 billion in research and development. That's about 3% of the federal budget. $135 billion has a lot of zeros. This is the good news. We have been spending on research and development and innovation as the federal government because we have 50 years of runway. If something doesn't get commercialized, you're still advancing the frontiers of human knowledge. The United States is not what it is by happenstance. It's because we put money to work in innovation. One of those things being the internet in the very early days, not Al Gore's internet. We take a slice of that $135 billion for small businesses to participate in that research and development, and that happens all across the spectrum. National Science Foundation, Department of Defense, NIH, the 11 agencies that have the biggest research budgets we take a slice of that so that small companies can participate. And a lot of those research projects are actually extremely early stage, where no commercially driven venture capitalists will dare to go in. Because what's our job as a federal government? To de-risk some of that technology risk. Now, FCC, where we're sitting today, is mostly a regulatory agency. They don't really spend on research, but a lot of the other agencies, Energy, NSF, and all the others that have budgets, there's a lot of telecommunications and mobile technology and stuff that happens and spending that happens on those places. Good place to start if you're looking to fund your technology, sbir.gov. That shows you the panoply of all the items there. The program puts to work about $2.5 billion into about 6,000 very early stage companies. It's been around since '82, and I'll tell you a few companies that have come out of there. Genentech, the first compound that Genentech developed. Biogen, which developed a compound called Rituxan for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Symantec, very near and dear to the content of this panel. So we are working very hard to try to figure out how to fill the biggest gaps. And this is a great discussion, and I'm very happy to be here.
That's very informative. I want to follow up on one thing. There are many benefits to the program, SBIR program in particular. Can you share a little bit in terms of the advantage from a dilutive perspective, why that's important?
That's a good question. So if you think about a balance sheet, and I'm not going to go into Finance 101, but equity equal assets plus liability. So if you raise debt, liabilities go up. If you raise equity, equity goes up. But there's another way to actually get capitalized, and that is non-dilutive capital. And that comes in three ways: contracts, sales, right? If you sell, you're not really diluting your capital base. You're getting money and hopefully selling for more than what it cost you, and grants. So the SBIR program, which is your key question, they're actually grants from the government, which actually means that you're not selling equity, a portion of your company. You're not raising debt, so you don't owe anything to anybody. You do have to go through some hoops to get free money, right? It's government money, and it's very difficult, but it doesn't cost you anything. And at the end of that, if you get IP, because part of this is how do you get licensable IP, patented IP, it becomes yours. The government has no stake in the patents. So it's basically free money for very STEM-driven, tech-driven entrepreneurs to raise that very, very early stage money, so that then you can go in front of a person like Tony and go, hey, I got $1.1 million from the government in 5 grants. I'm ready to take this to the next level.
Great. Appreciate that. All right, we have a question that I wanted to share, and anyone from the panel is more than welcome to answer or respond. The question is this, is how will the hurdles be made lower for startups? I am an entrepreneur who used my own capital to start up a CRM technology for women, veterans, and underserved entrepreneurs. My team worked on this platform for 4 years at a loss. I was told yesterday that I shouldn't have suffered a significant loss to build this platform, so no loan. How will we get over these hurdles? You guys want to take a stab at this?
Yeah, in that case, it sounds like the lenders didn't like this applicant, either because they were too new, they didn't have enough revenues, or other reasons. If you think about how banks work, they take in capital from all of us in our savings accounts, and what do you get on your savings account? Right, less than 1%. National average is 0.11 APY. They take in capital at that cost, and they lend it out, and they have to do so to make profitable loans. The problem is between the money coming in from all of us in our savings accounts and those borrowers is a lot of due diligence, a lot of regulation, and that since the financial crisis has actually gotten worse. So what you do is you find a platform, could be crowdfunding, could be a platform like StreetShares, where those borrowers can leverage their status, right? In our case, we focus on funding veteran-owned small businesses. I was a veteran before becoming a Wall Street lawyer, before leaving to do this. Veterans trust each other. There are other communities that certainly trust each other. So if you can go on to a platform where people in your community can lend to you and there are additional bases of trust, then you can bring that cost of capital down for the borrower. And so there are ways in this day and age to now look beyond sort of the traditional bank underwriting metrics to other characteristics such as affinity group membership, veteran status, for example, to then bring down that cost of capital.
I mean, if I can just add, I mean, we are taking our sort of thinking and our metrics and our banking standards to a community that we feel like has been sort of left out of at least the second stage funding for businesses that have been proven and that are ready to sort of take the next level. One of the reason Pamela Thomas Graham is focused on primarily the African American community is, I think there are statistics that show that the minuscule amounts of business investment has gone into African American entrepreneurs, and this is historic and unfortunate. We're involved in a study that was backed by Brandeis University that basically shows that, and it's great to see all the people in the room who basically sort of counter this, but unfortunately in the African American community, it may be the case in the veterans community, because you don't have the sort of historic access to capital or access to opportunities or people willing to take a look at your idea, you don't even try. So there's this huge level of risk aversion to sort of investing your assets into business investments rather than just sticking them in a bank. And by the way, Credit Suisse does not help retail operations in the state, so we don't have any savings accounts. But just sticking them in the bank and saying, I'll earn some small interest on a CD or bond. So we feel like we're spearheading an effort for large banks on Wall Street to do the due diligence, but taking a chance on proven companies in the African American community.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think it's also important to understand as an entrepreneur, as a startup company, what kind of capital really is available to you. So I think there are very excellent examples that are here at this table, but I think it's important to understand that your traditional bank is not going to provide any sort of startup capital. That's not what they do. If you're going to get startup capital from a bank, the reality is if you own a home, it's going to come from your home equity line or something like that. They're not going to provide, financing for businesses that have no revenue and no product and so on. Typically, that type of capital has really come from angel funding or friends and family, exhausting all your resources, tapping out your credit, so on and so forth. That's, we as entrepreneurs, that's how we start businesses. The beauty of what's going on today and the environment today is you do have access to capital from crowdfunding and street shares and those types of businesses that really didn't exist, even just a few years ago. So and I totally agree that this environment is so unique today that it doesn't cost that much to start businesses. So, as entrepreneurs, it's really refreshing. As was stated before, raising capital and starting a business is incredibly difficult, but the barriers are different now. Again, the cost of building a company and then the resources that are available for entrepreneurs. And so I think you have to get out there and just turn over every single stone. And as entrepreneurs, you just don't get discouraged because with all the no's that you end up seeing, ultimately what's been our experience and my experience, because we do go and beg for that money from our investors, you turn over enough stones, those opportunities. But you have to understand where you should be able to get your capital, even if you're in a particular sector, particular strategy of your company. You should be very familiar with where potential sources of capital can come from. One other thing I would add is executives at tech companies, executives at all types of companies, and all walks of life a lot of them do angel investing. So if you are out there talking to people, promoting your business, trying to network, if you will also run across entrepreneurs who may be that source of capital for that 10, 20, 100, whatever, or they also know groups of people that they can pull capital together. So you really have to be out there turning over every single stone.
Yeah, First thing I would say to this person is they should call Javier. Javier thinks about these issues. You know, I know we've been on a couple of panels before, and I know he feels deeply about these kind of access to capital issues. SBA has a huge, you know, I'm something of a critic of the SBA, but they do have a huge database of very good information that's useful for people in this situation. The other thing I would say is that the angel option is probably the best one. There's an angel group called Keiretsu Forum. I don't know how you spell that, but Google it, right? It's an angel network in California and on the East Coast that brings angels together with new companies. So sitting down and talking to them. Looking at Kiva in some of the peer-to-peer lending groups would probably be another option. I mean, you're right, Tony. It's an all of the above type of strategy. You know, the person, I would say they should email me at info@creativeinvest.com or info@minorityfinance.com. These are the kinds of questions I've been getting, again, since 1995. And then finally, crowdfunding. If he believes in his product so much that he's willing to spend everything he has, then he should be willing to have the market test the idea. And that's what crowdfunding does. He says, all right, I'm going to put my product up. I'm going to put it on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, GoFundMe, StreetShares, Fundrise, wherever. And I'm going to see if these people think it's as good an idea as I do. Because if they are willing to go into their pocket and take out some money to support my idea, then the product has validity. So that's kind of where he is. It's unfortunate because my sense is if this guy could have gotten a loan for $100,000 4 years ago, or $250,000, 2 years ago, he'd be in a much better financial position. The product would probably be better too. But it is what it is.
This next question from the audience is sort of a piggyback to what we've already spoken about, but I'm going to frame it a little bit differently because I think it gets to the same point. In my experience, there's this gap, what I call the gap issue. Typically, on the front end, entrepreneurs have a challenge getting that initial seed capital. That's, 1,000 to 100,000, whatever the number is. Typically, the angels like to come in from 250,000 typically to a max of about $2 million. So that first gap is that really early stage capital. The next gap is between that $2 million, where the angels sort of stop, and the $5 million, where VCs typically start off. So this next question sort of goes to that. It's difficult to get loans. What do you consider for investment, and what would you look for? But I'm going to rephrase it a little bit. How do you suggest entrepreneurs overcome those gap-related issues?
Yeah, I can start with that. Here's what I would do if I were you, right? You've got to view funding as a continuum, right? Cash is king in your business. You need it constantly to come in to keep you alive. How many great ideas die on the vine for lack of cash flow, right? A lot do. So you've got to start with that easiest to obtain capital, okay? And then kind of work your way up as your business grows. So if I'm a new entrepreneur, which I am, I would start with grants and what do we call triple F, the 3 Fs, friends, family, and fools, right? So you start with that sort of free money that you can get from the rich uncle, from grants, from the SBA program. There are some other private grant programs out there. You would then go on to some kind of a Kickstarter, a rewards-based crowdfunding campaign. Note on crowdfunding, and I think Bill can talk to this, there's a world of difference between what's called rewards-based crowdfunding and investment crowdfunding. The regulatory environment of those two things is quite different. Bill can speak to that later on. But I would start with a rewards-based crowdfunding campaign, Kickstarter, Indiegogo. On the debt side, there are some very good micro loans. They give loans for $5,000, $10,000 to get you started. Platforms like Kiva, platforms like Axion, ACCION. From there, you would go on to a platform like StreetShares. Once you've been around for a year and have some revenue, then you're a good candidate for us. Angel investors are primarily only going to be interested in you if you have a technology base or something with some IP behind it. A lot of small business owners think that they can get angel funding, but the nature of their business is simply not appropriate for for angel funding. And then as you grow and you've got some revenues and a very scalable idea, then you can go on to the larger VC groups, to bank loans, SBA programs, and so forth. So you've got to start at the scale that you're at, and then grow with different creative funding sources as your business grows.
I think you're right. The life cycle of a company is mirrored by a life cycle in the financing of that company, right? From your mom writing you a check to help you start it, all the way to a Goldman Sachs taking you IPO, which is a way of raising money. It just sounds more sexy, but it's a big way of raising money, and everything in between. You started the discussion, Alonzo, with this gap, and that word again, gap. That has a name, two names, the Valley of Death or the Ditch of Death. And it's a real issue. You've heard about fast fail, lean startup methodology, where 10 years ago you needed to buy servers to start a technology company. That was a big portion of what venture capitalists gave you money for. You don't need that anymore. You pay to play. So now all of a sudden your barriers of entry are low, right? Proof of concept happens, and then you get to that point where you need what used to be a Series A or round one of professionally managed venture capital. That game has changed, because now what used to be venture capitalists investing in 200 companies for the most part and seeing what's stuck to the wall. And by the way, I've been before I had this job, I've been on both sides of the fence. I've been an entrepreneur 3 times with a spectacular failure in the media and telecommunications area, actually, so thank you, FCC. I've also been on the investing side. I've been a venture capitalist, so I've seen it. I've lived it in kind of in the private sector. The construct of how venture capital runs now is a lot different. They're making less bets. They're making bigger bets on less amount of companies. Number one. Number two is that where the money comes from is not really the venture capitalists. They manage money for fiduciaries. And the fiduciaries have pulled back, and Credit Suisse knows this very well, from the asset class of venture capital, because when the crisis happened, it looked like the venture capital asset class was overvalued because everything got marked down, so they started pulling back. So there's actually less money going in the asset class, which gave birth, sort of, kinda, to the Jobs Act, which gave oomph to crowd financing, one of which is Title III, equity crowdfunding, which everybody's very excited about. That one doesn't quite solve the Valley of Death. And disclaimer, I actually hold an observer seat at the SEC's Advisory Committee on Small and Emerging Companies. The biggest thing that most people in the country understand that's on the table, and I can tell you that, and I'm not speaking for the SEC, but I can tell you that the chairwoman of the SEC, Mary Jo White, doesn't talk about this if, but when. They really want to get this done. And that Valley of Death, creativity, leaving no stone unturned, having no shame, I mean, all the things that you associate aggressive entrepreneurs with, you got to do them.
All right. Appreciate it. I'm going to combine, this is a really interesting question. I'm going to combine a couple of questions. The first one says, many investors define early stage differently. How do you define early stage startups? Is it pre-seed, seed, Series A, B? Very good question. And the next part of that is, what is the best way for an entrepreneur to approach a VC for seed funding? How do you go about it? To say it differently, does that entrepreneur go directly to the VC? Does that entrepreneur go through a conduit? What's the best way to approach the VCs for early stage? That's the second part of the question.
So the second part of the question I'll touch on first. The best way to approach a VC, just to give you a little bit of a sense, we probably see 400 or 500 deals coming through our door each year. And that comes through emails, through the mail, through our personal networks of bankers, attorneys, entrepreneurs, you name it. Out of those 400, we may do 3 or 4 deals a year. We are very active, hands-on investors, and so we have to manage our time in our own capacity. So we're not going to do 100 deals or in a portfolio. To your point, we do a very concentrated, small amount of deals so that we can spend the right amount of time that we believe and the value that we believe we can add. So what I will say, though, the vast lion's share, I can't think of any deals that got done, actually in my career, that just came through, maybe a few, that just came through the email or through the mail. Everything came through your trusted network. So the importance of getting out there, meeting entrepreneurs, meeting executives, meeting lawyers, the bankers, and so on, that can bring deals to us. That vets a deal at a certain level for us. If a trusted entrepreneur comes to me and recommends somebody to me, I'm going to pay attention. They've already sort of met that threshold, which is important for us because this is we really bet on teams. We understand spaces. Obviously we have themes and ideas about what a company should be, what it should do, and so on, and we bet on that. But at this stage, you bet on the entrepreneur. You bet on the team. We spend so much time. I spend more time with my entrepreneurs than I do with my family, frankly, as bad as that sounds. But it's just a reality. And there are bumps along the way. And so that's why, again, if a trusted entrepreneur or a trusted lawyer brings a deal to me, and they're essentially vouching for somebody, that's important for me because you have a sense of, what you're going to go through with that individual, that company. And sorry, what was the first question?
The early stage, definition of early stage.
Definition of early stage, could it be anywhere from, that sort of PowerPoint presentation to something that is just gaining traction, either usage of their product, early revenue. It's not profitable yet. For us, it's still from that PowerPoint to the point where they're just initially gaining some traction. That's early stage for us.
Bill, you had something to add?
Yeah, on the trusted network, I'm going to give you guys a secret. This is a gift, all right? So I used to run the social purpose investing for the second largest religious pension fund. And we would get, and that included equity, debt, and private equity. We hired a firm called Progress Investment Trust. I helped to get them in the door as minority venture capital. So here's what I'm saying. If you want to go to somebody like Tony, look at who his institutional investors are. If he gets money from the State of New York Pension Fund, do you all get money from State of New York? Yeah, see, I picked that one right out of the hat. So go to, and you're in New York, right? You have some tie to that pension fund. You want to be subtle about this, right? Because if you go to them and say, hey, I've got money in your pension fund and my son needs $1 million to start business, I'm going to call up Tony. And then you call up Tony and go, hey, I just talked to the State of New York Pension Fund and they told me to call you. That's not going to work, right? That's just going to piss them off, okay? You don't want to do that. You want to use you want to use those silos of capital. You want to go and do your research. You want to do two things. You want to show him that you understand where he gets his money from, all right? And then number two, you want to show him that, hey, you can utilize that information in a way that helps him out and helps you out at the same time. Win-win for everybody. I've seen that work. So the pension fund that I worked for was Lutheran Church, and we would get these Lutheran ministers who would call us up and say, hey, my parishioner needs $1 million for their new, there's nothing I can do with that, right? But there was one Lutheran minister who was very sharp. He came up to the pension fund when we were having a board meeting, and, he was just interested in how the fund worked, and, he wanted to know who the personalities were, and they told him, well, no, you need to go talk to Bill Cunningham, right? They pointed him to me, and he wasn't aggressive about it. He was just saying, hey, I may have uncovered something that you might or might not be interested in. I know that you don't control, and this is the other part. He knew that I could not get the money from Progress, right? They have their own investment policies and procedures. So he had looked at the investment policies and procedures governing that venture capital fund. Smart, right? So, but he said, hey, I think this is a really interesting idea, a parishioner of mine, you might want to take a look at it. I sent it to Progress. I don't know, I don't think they ever did anything with it, but it was just a great way to move that forward, right? Not being super aggressive. So what I would say is go look at the funds, private equity, venture capital, look at who they get their money from, and reach out to those institutions.
Let me just follow up on that. And that's the thing. We will definitely take a call that comes by way of our investors. There's no doubt about that. I think it's definitely incumbent upon the entrepreneur to make sure that you understand what that firm does, so that, and you make sure that you understand that what you're pitching is a likely fit with that firm. So then it gives you credibility to go to that institution, that board member on that pension fund, to say, XYZ is in your fund. I'd like an introduction. This is what we do, which fits with what they do. And then the introduction happens. And the other thing is, again, the hit rate, if you will, of investment is going to be very small. But what you want to do is, if you're able to get in that door, is to go from that door and probably get an introduction to somebody else. You've got to use every connection from that pension fund, from that board member to the introduction to that VC. If they're not going to do your deal, are there people? We know a lot of people that operate in totally different spaces that can then, maybe they're interested in your deal, and just go from there to there to there. You really have to be able to do that.
Okay. This next question deals with disruptive technology. And essentially the question is whether the approach to seeking funding changes any if you have technology that's considered disruptive or a game-changing type of technology. And would you recommend anyone as a coach for mentoring, that kind of thing? Any thoughts on that? Is the approach the same, or would you envision something different? It's defined here as game-changing technology.
Unless you go through sort of the rigorous standards that I think, certainly Credit Suisse would put behind looking at whether or not it really is game-changing technology. I don't know that you can necessarily define it if you don't have a track record. Mm-hmm. If it's a technology that's been around for a while, I'm quite sure, and it is game-changing, I'm quite sure there'll be venture capitalists, there'll be government organizations lining up to invest in it. So I'm not sure if it is that you would have a problem.
It's probably on a case-by-case. It depends on what the technology is.
Yeah.
Case-by-case basis.
It depends on what the technology is, and again, knowing exactly what the investor is interested in. So some investors may not be interested in, that literally the bleeding edge of technology. You bleed so much that they'll run out of money and you'll run out of money. Some investors are not even interested in that. They're venture investors, but maybe they want an existing technology that you can leverage and bring a new idea to. And so, again, if it's that ground-breaking, it's probably in a particular space. And so you have to be an expert in that space, and you have to know where the experts are in that space. And there's going to be probably a community of investors, whether they're angel investors or firms that focus on that space. You have to be able to.
I can share one, and I think that's where sort of what it boils down to. I've got a client that has a technology that is just disruptive. Now that I think about it, based upon your whoever it was definition, this technology will supposedly put the space 25 years ahead of where it is today. And this particular client has tried government, no luck. The VC community, a little bit of luck. But his real success has been with strategic partnerships. So there is no magic bullet there. You just have to try, as someone else pointed out, look at where you are and try. But I think that's probably a good example. He's had to try every angle, but that's where that particular client has ended up with the most amount of success.
If I just last thing. So I would go to a lawyer. I mean, if you have an engine that runs on water, you're not going to go to GM, right? That's the prototypical example of a disruptive technology. If I have a new financial tool that eliminates banks, and crowdfunding, by the way, may do that, I'm not going to expect to get support from a bank. So the first thing I would tell a person to do is go talk to a lawyer, and look at copywriting, $35, Library of Congress, the text surrounding the idea. Then I would look at trademark, $400, And then I would look at patent, I'd do the intellectual property stuff first. And the copyright, $35, you can do it online at the Library of Congress. It protects the text. It doesn't protect the idea. It just protects the expression of the idea so that nobody can use that exact same text. So you do that first. And then you go talk to a lawyer. And then you do the opposite of what people tell you to do in terms of reaching out to certain companies, depending upon how disruptive the thing is. Again, engine runs on water, don't go to GM.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Great point. I've got a couple of additional questions, and this one is one that we face every day, and it's about skin in the game. From your respective positions, how important is having skin in the game, and what amount of skin should be required or is required if there is to be any skin in the game? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I would say that it's essential. For example, on street shares, our investors trust us because we have skin in the game. Every single borrower that we put on our platform for them to invest in, we co-invest as well. And we do so very transparently, so they know what we think about that a borrower, how risky they are, et cetera. From the perspective of an entrepreneur, I think you're putting it out there. Certainly, any partners that you bring along, anyone who's going to come in and vouch for you, for example, oftentimes at pitch contests, it's a smart idea to have one of your current investors come in and explain to the angels why they backed you. Right? Having skin in the game gives them credibility to then validate your idea.
Yeah, I mean, for our entrepreneur circle, we're putting skin in the game, albeit towards companies that have a proven track record. But they go through not only we have an advisory board of African American business leaders who choose these, who've chosen these companies, and then they go through the other process of saying, all right, well, our community of experts and investment bankers within Credit Suisse have chosen these companies to get off the books funding, and we're going to sort of surround you and inculcate you in our culture that we think breeds success. So, that for us is our skin in the game, especially for African American entrepreneur circle that we've established.
You require the entrepreneur herself to also have skin in the game, or?
Well, they're already in. Their skin in the game is bringing their company to the table that they've shown a proven track record. We're trying to sort of give them that. We talked about the gaps and the different levels of funding that an entrepreneur faces. This is, I think, beyond sort of early stage funding, maybe beyond angel funding, maybe even beyond VC funding. And because of, as Javier alluded to earlier, bank regulations after the crisis that would disallow us from having a more than 3% equity investment or 25% ownership. This is our way of helping support entrepreneurs in the African American community.
I really hate to do this, but I know we started a little late, I have to go, but I want to point out somebody in the audience, my senior advisor, Nate Johannes. Raise your hand. Higher. If anybody has any questions about anything related to any of the topics today, please reach out to him and it will get to me. I'm so sorry I have to leave. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Let me just add, skin in the game, absolutely, 100%. You gotta have you're asking me and my wife and my kids to put our skin in your game. You better have skin in your game too, without a doubt. That's a non-starter.
This next question is interesting, and it's a real issue out there, in my opinion. Someone from Atlanta that has a significant amount of tech activity, entrepreneurial activity, and including tech. But in terms of the capital itself is a little bit lagging. And the question goes towards the geography of capital. We all know that during the tech days, it was Silicon Valley, Boston, Austin, Texas. Those were the meccas in terms of where the real capital, Maryland, D.C. But that dynamic has changed. How important is the geography of capital, and is this a trend that you guys see ongoing? Do you see it becoming less of an issue? How do you see it progressing going forward?
I would say that it's incredibly important and thankfully becoming less so. So with crowdfunding, with platforms like StreetShares, we're using the internet to democratize capital. There's a great paper out of Harvard Business School that demonstrates that 49% of all VC firms and 49% of all VC deals right now are in 3 cities. And you know what they are: San Francisco, Boston, New York. 89% of those firms are in the top 9 cities. Thankfully, DC is one of those. But if you are an entrepreneur in Colby, Kansas, who has a great idea, your odds of accessing or knowing the people who will have access to these firms are extremely low. We care a lot about veterans in my company. Veterans are primarily from more rural areas, right, on average. And so they have difficulty accessing capital. So it is traditionally very difficult. It is still centralized in a handful of metropolitan areas. But efforts like StreetShares, efforts like crowdfunding platforms are beginning to break up that geographic monopoly that we currently have.
Yeah.
Geography, if I go back to our history, actually the beauty of our business was we funded licensed and franchised businesses that came out of, and all those entrepreneurs came to the FCC. And so we could be in Silver Spring, Maryland, or in Washington, D.C., and all the talented entrepreneurs that wanted to do anything in that space had to come through this city. So that was of benefit to us. So geographically, it made sense for us to be here, not less so these days. The other part of our strategy is having the opportunity to back the brightest minds on the planet of African Americans, Latinos, and Asian entrepreneurs. And because there was not a lot of capital targeted toward our community, we were able to have, in our opinion, the ability to choose from the best of the best, and wherever they were. The problem for us, which meant that I have been on lots more planes than I care to ever be on, but that's the nature of this business. In Silicon Valley, you have such a concentration of capital and entrepreneurs. Venture capitalists and entrepreneurs don't have to drive further than 10, 15 miles to do a deal. That's not my reality. And so we are on the planes a lot and travel a lot. We see a lot of deals coming from outside of the country in Asia and Africa and elsewhere. And that's when things like geography have a very, as an early stage investor, you're going to have a problem. It is going to hit the fan. The businesses are going to either fail outright or have to be revitalized and so on. When that happens, your investor, at least the way that we invest, we're very active, hands-on. We spend a lot of time. So we're going to be there with you. And so times when deals have come to us in outside of the country or farther away, we kind of look around the table at each other. When it hits the fan, who's going to go to China and spend months at a time? Whose family's going to let them do that? So that's just our reality. We're not, because of the way that we invest, we're not set up to really, do deals that far afield. And traveling across the country, we do it regularly. That is very tough, but we do it.
That's an interesting point. Hey, Kwame, would you go to the table and get that handout and kind of pass it around? There's a reason what I'm pointing out is we have gotten some hits from churches, black churches, who apparently have outposts in Africa. So they're sitting, yes, that one. If you want to hand that one out. Is that the one from yesterday? Not the one from yesterday, but the one from today? I think it's over on the table. The point is that these guys have 2 churches in Kenya. And they have curated companies and projects in Kenya, right? And they are looking so they're having an event in Philadelphia on February 20th and 21st, where they're bringing back some of the people from these businesses that surround their church in Kenya. And they're bringing back to the U.S., and they're either going to do crowdfunding or they're going to reach out to VCs, maybe banks. I'm not, they're trying to figure that out. But the idea is that because they're there, because the communication technology allows them to use their church outpost to screen and select companies in that geographic region, that they can bring them back and use that tie to access capital for these very small, micro, very interesting kind of companies. So we're seeing the geographic focus, and you're right, Mark. I mean, it's crazy how focused venture capital and other funding sources are. But we're seeing some of those collapse, especially with crowdfunding. And again, on the little flyer that Kwame handed out, at the bottom is the information on the, I forget the name of the Baptist church in Philadelphia, but it talks about kind of what they're doing on February 20th and 21st. Where did Kwame go? All right, there you go. All right. Yeah.
All right. We're going to wrap up. There was one last question, and if anyone has any closing comments, please feel free to do so. But the last question, I think Chairman Wheeler would appreciate this one, is what do you think about the current net neutrality debate, and what should be the FCC's participation or help? How does the FCC help in terms of entrepreneurs with respect to this issue? Chairman Wheeler spoke pretty directly about this. Any other?
I work in government affairs for a large bank,
Yeah.
so we don't. I don't have any comments on net neutrality.
Any other thoughts, comments about it? Yeah. We'll pull the text of Chairman Wheeler's comments and forward those around. But I think it's pretty evident he wants us. He's in another month, I think he said that it would be actual voting here. So write your congressman and support it any way you possibly can. Well, any closing comments before we wrap up by the panelists?
Well, I applaud all of you entrepreneurs. Like the chairman said, you have a very tough job, but if you weren't up to the task, you clearly have the personality that's well suited to be able to do it, and I commend you for that. And I wish you all the best opportunity and luck in it, because it does take a fair amount of luck as well. And graces from above, in my opinion. But at the same time, I want to thank Tom and the FCC for sessions like this. They are very important, especially from my perspective, for underserved communities that typically don't have this access to capital and this access to this conversation. And I noticed that there was a young. Somebody brought a child in here, which I thought if my kids didn't have to go to school today, I would have brought them, because I think it's important for kids to be, especially our kids of color, to experience this entrepreneurial environment, because many of us didn't grow up that way, and things like this and events like this spark that idea. So
certainly. Again, thanks to the FCC. Thank you, Alonzo. Fellow Bison, fellow Howard University graduate, thanks for coming down. Thank you for putting this on. I mean, we're in the conference room of the Federal Communications Commission, and we're having an event. We're sitting right here, it's just amazing the kinds of things that you can do. This is a great, great event. On the net neutrality issue, I was delighted to hear the chairman's comments. You cannot have a fast lane and a slow lane for the internet. It makes no sense. The economic value, as I calculate it as an economist, of having the internet has been trillions and trillions of dollars. So why would you get in the way of that? You need to have a fast pipe everywhere. If anything, you need to talk about access everywhere. So especially in communities of color. We're experts at turning, what's the saying on the street, turning a dime into a dollar? Did I get that right? Okay, so certainly having free internet access is one of the ways that we do that, or having fast, high-speed internet access is one of the ways that we do that. So you just have to have that. The economics justify that type of decision. So that's the only thing I would say. And again, thanks to my panelists, my fellow panelists also. I mean, I really, really appreciate being on this panel with you. I'm honored.
I'd just like to close and thank Commissioner Clyburn, Tom Reed, and the rest of our staff. Tony and I were talking before and thinking of sort of how some of the wealth efforts in the African American community got started, and they were by women, right? So you have Commissioner Clyburn, and you have Pamela Thomas Graham, who is the highest-ranking woman and highest-ranking African American, and on our executive board at Credit Suisse. And because of a meeting between them, that's why I'm here. So I just like to thank her.
It is a very exciting time to be an entrepreneur, right? You know that it is easier to start a business now than ever. The ability to use use the cloud. We don't have to get a big room full of servers anymore to do what we do. And some of those barriers to capital are now coming down. However, as a general principle, I think you'll need to look beyond the traditional funding sources, right? Look to platforms, crowdfunding platforms, street shares, and others. There's kind of a perfect storm right now of societal acceptance of non-traditional funding. Some regulatory changes that at the same time have made it more difficult for banks to lend and easier for non-banks to lend, and that's a good thing. And then third, necessity, right? Necessity is what? The mother of all invention. And one of the real benefits to come out of the crisis is that you've had a necessity for some entrepreneurs to step up with some creative platforms to get capital into the right hands. So a very exciting time to be an entrepreneur. Honored to be here, and I wish each of you the very best. Thanks.
I'll just have one. I appreciate that from each of you. I really do. And I'll just add one thing. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at this report, the Kauffman Foundation issued a report, I think it was in 1999, and I apologize, Tony probably knows it by heart, the name of the report, but I can't recall the name of it. But it's the Kauffman Foundation, and the report focused on the importance of analyzing and determining whether women and minority-owned companies could produce an above average or a rate of return that would be acceptable to the investment community. Long story short, the report concluded that it would and had a list of conclusions. But the most important thing that came out of that to me, and beyond that, was this. It said that we all know that by 2040, minority-owned companies will be the majority. And we also know that small businesses, which most of these companies will be, small businesses are the engine that drives the nation's economy. So if small businesses will be run predominantly by minority-owned companies as soon as 2014, then it's not just in their best interest, but it's in the nation's long-term economic interest to support those companies. So it's interesting and almost ironic that we're here today in a federal agency talking about financing, because it is definitely appropriate. So we wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give our panel another big hand. Thank you, Alonzo, for moderating. Mark, Terrence, Tony, Bill, and Javier. I know he left early. I know, Nate, you'll be here to fill his shoes for the afternoon, so thank you very much. We're going to take about a 10-minute break. There are tons of refreshments in the room down the hall. If you all don't eat them, we'll have to, and I've had enough to eat, so please do partake. We're going to get back here. We're going to start the next panel about 11:15. So thank you very much. And we can get started. We're getting started a little bit later. We want to make sure that we don't encroach on the lunch hour. Okay, we'll give her a chance again. This next panel is our incubation panel, how to grow your idea into a business. All right, entity formation and incubation. Moderating this panel is our good friend and expert, S. Janelle Trigg. What does the S stand for?
Super.
There we go. That's what I thought. We always say, I thought it was awesome, but, Janelle, who has been a great friend to the agency, a colleague of ours and I'm not going to date it back, and also a member of an honorary, well, not just honorary, a member of OCBO. So Janelle's going to be moderating. We have Amy Millman, Springboard Enterprises, on this panel. Aaron Horn McKinney, the Office of the Deputy Mayor, for Planning and Economic Development. Well, Clayton Banks, unfortunately, got trapped in New York under the snow, so he can't be with us from Silicon Harlem. Tia Capps from Gig Tank and the Company Lab. Keith Jacobs, On Track Life. Aaron Starasta, Digital Health Accelerator, and Aliyah Rahman of Code for Progress. So let's get started. Janelle, thank you very much, and I will cede the mic to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for OCBO for hosting this. As Thomas mentioned, I'm an alumnus of the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. I had the pleasure of working here when I was in law school. I was a senior telecom policy analyst, and I helped with the implementation of the 1996 Act. that seems like ages ago. I'm also very grateful to Chairman Wheeler, Commissioner Clyburn, and Commissioner O'Reilly for their comments and their continued support of small businesses, minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and entrepreneurs. Welcome to How to Grow Your Idea into a Business, Entity Formation and Incubation. In today's highly focused technology environment, there are different forms of support for new entrant small businesses, women and minority-owned businesses, entrepreneurs in the tech field, ranging from local, state, and federal programs, private sector support, and private-public partnerships. While small businesses have long been the engine of our economy, it is reported that one tech job creates 5 additional jobs. And we heard today about some of the obstacles and the concerns, as well as the changing dynamics in this field. Commissioner Clyburn mentioned that the Internet of Things technology will create $1.7 trillion to our economy. Telecommunications represents 1/6 of our gross national product. But at the same time, less than 1/20th of 1% of startups get professional institutional dollars. 9.9% of those get angel money, and we know the obstacles faced by minority and women-owned businesses have long been traditional discrimination, short and long-term as well. So our distinguished panel of experts today will discuss some of the traditional and non-traditional resources and support that are available for small, minority, and women-owned tech companies to grow their businesses. So let's start with the basics. Will each of you provide just a brief history about your organization? What are your areas of specialization and expertise? What's your general mission and your primary objective? Shall we start with Tia?
Sure. I'm Tia Katz, and I'm the Communications Director for the Company Lab. The Company Lab is a nonprofit startup accelerator in Southeast Tennessee, and our mission is to strengthen our entrepreneurial ecosystem and increase the viability of startups in our region. We're best known for producing Gig Tank, and that's a boutique startup accelerator for companies that want to leverage Chattanooga's gigabit internet network to develop next-generation business models.
Keith?
Hi, good morning. My name is Keith Jacobs. I'm President and CEO of OnTrack Life Solutions. We are a Web 3.0 technology platform developer. We develop live technology platforms, live change solutions, and live decision support applications. Simply put, we want to enable individuals and communities to solve community-based problems at the community level. Our goal is to simplify how we live and learn. We were organized in 2006. We are a Delaware corporation.
Erin?
Good morning. My name is Erin Horn McKinney. I'm the Tech and Innovation Sector Manager for the District of Columbia out of the Deputy Mayor's Office of Planning and Economic Development. That long title means that we represent the mayor's interest in trying to help D.C. become one of the largest tech cities on the East Coast. And what it also means is we are the ones that have created this wonderful marketing and economic development campaign called Digital DC that some of you may have heard of. It's a 3-pronged approach that first has the marketing piece where we launched last year to kind of really put DC on the map. We launched at South by Southwest in Austin in 2014, and we also created a social media campaign and a dedicated website for one-stop shop resources that the district offers. The second piece is that we created a tech corridor, the Digital DC Tech Opportunities Corridor in the district. And then we also launched a pilot tech fund, which is the first that DC has ever had. And so we awarded 8 grantees up to close to $1 million this past September. So our mission is to grow innovation in the district and really put DC on the map, not just nationally, but internationally for what's possible.
Amy?
Morning. So I'm Amy Millman. I run a nonprofit that's based here but acting globally. The focus is on women-led startups that are looking to scale significantly and do that through equity investments. We've been around 15 years, and our focus has been to look at the life science end of the spectrum, biotech, even health IT, digital media, and anything dealing with a scalable business. Our companies, we've worked over the last 15 years with about 560 companies, again, led by women, that have raised nearly $7 billion, created tens and tens of thousands of jobs. And again, the same thing we've been talking about here. You create one opportunity, you open a door for somebody, and they create all kinds of opportunities after that. 2/3 of our entrepreneurs are serial entrepreneurs, meaning they've done this several times, and so we're trying to develop an entrepreneurial leader corps that is led by women.
Great. Aliyah.
Hi, good morning. My name is Aliyah Rahman, and I'm the program director at Code for Progress. So we are a C3 nonprofit, and our mission is to move activists of color, predominantly women, into full-time jobs as full-stack developers, mobile and web. So we just finished our first formal cohort. They had 100% job placement. They're with us for 5 months in D.C., so they come from around the country and stay with us on a salary in the district, work together as a cohort, and then for the 7 months after the residency, I seem to be spending more time with them than when I saw them 40 hours a week in the classroom, talking about what it's like to actually be in a predominantly white environment, working as a techie, et cetera. So they have the option to move forward and be entrepreneurs, but what's important to us is that when they leave the residency, they have full-time income. So for some folks, that's about getting a coder job first, to be able to get the technical skills down to then be a technical co-founder of a startup if that's what they want to do. So we teach, again, full-stack coding, human-centered design, so agile project management, and really focusing on users because that's who they are. They have a demonstrated track record of being community organizers and understand who's going to use this stuff. And the third piece is this professional development around being a person of color and or a woman in the tech environment.
Great. Aaron.
I was confused the first time you said Aaron because I was thinking, oh, me, and then I didn't realize there's another Aaron on here. My name is Aaron Starosta. I run the Digital Health Accelerator in Philadelphia, PA. Over the past 5 years, I've architected and run maybe 10 or 12 of these around the world, including Sweden, Russia, Canada, the Canadian Tech Accelerator. I'm working with GCMI in Atlanta and now Indiana as well. So my background is in accelerator building and development and running of, and I make a distinction between accelerators and incubators, and if anybody cares at some point, you can certainly ask me what that is. But we currently have a cohort running in Philadelphia that is made up of companies that have in 5 months generated $400,000 in revenue, 40 jobs, and are looking at about $4 million in investment follow-on in these early-stage companies. So headed by women, minorities, and non-minorities alike. So I think we have a pretty good formula, and the key thing that I think probably most people will be interested in knowing about us is we don't take equity. So we give you $50,000, and we don't take a dollar. And there's reasons why we do that as well, and certainly if people are interested, ask away.
Well, we're going to get to that, but I do want to follow up on the accelerator and incubator. In fact, so that everyone is on the same page. We've used some of these terms already. There's some other terms we're going to talk about. Let's talk about how they're different, how they're the same. Incubator, accelerator. There's the new term, excubator. And, of course, co-working space. What are they, how they're different, how they're the same? Anyone can kick off. Aaron, since you brought it first.
Well, excubator sounds
obscene, yes.
Yeah. So I'm just going to stick to incubator and accelerator. So incubator to me means that you take smart people, put them in a room, give them mentorship, give them some money, and you stir them up and they generate some really great ideas. And then they have these great ideas that they want to then sell into the world. And so they may have this product that's 10 times better than whatever's out there, but nobody knows about it. So they've got to go out there, they've got to convince people, and a large portion of what they do is marketing. So they're going to blow a ton of their budget, a ton of their time, and a lot of their energy just making people aware of what it is that they do. I found that that's sort of an inefficient way to do things because in the grand scheme of the world, in order to be successful, you have to make products that people want. So instead, I've turned it around. So in the case of the Digital Health Accelerator, we have on our board Merck's Global Investment Group. We've got Glaxo. We've got Shire. We've got Independence Blue Cross, their acquisition teams. We've got Safeguard Scientific's healthcare investors. These are people who make decisions within large corporations or large entities. And we have them choose our companies. So when we give them a portfolio of 100 healthcare companies, when they choose the final 10 that we take, they're choosing them because these are companies they'd want to partner with or pair with or work with. These are companies that they'd want to invest with. And even if they don't do that, they're essentially validating the companies before they even walk in the door. And that's partly why in 5 months we've had the success we've had with the companies. So for me, an incubator is a push environment where you push your technology out into the world. An accelerator is a pull environment where you're pulling solutions to problems that are known. So that's how I define it.
Aaron, you want to expand on that?
That was a great definition, but I'll talk about co-working spaces because I know this comes up a lot. In the district, it's really interesting because in the last 12 to 24 months, we've gone from less than 10 co-working spaces to more than 20. We've had, in the last year, we've had WeWork launch in the district, and they've already opened 3 locations that are now, almost all 3 are fully sold out. The district was the first investor in 1776, which is a co-working space that also has an incubator component to it that provides that mentorship that has been talked about. What's been really interesting about that is that the district was the first investor in 1776. It opened its doors in April of 2013. Since that time, we now have over almost 200 companies that are out of that space, and they run an international pitch competition in 16 cities, so 8 abroad, 8 within the U.S., called the Challenge Cup, and that culminates into the district in May of each year for a large scale pitch competition focusing on 4 verticals, which are ed tech, health IT, smart cities, and energy. And what we have found is that that's been great to kind of really showcase the district on a large scale, and through that, they've done a lot of mentorship there. But I think what's interesting is that we've seen so many different types of models for co-working. So there's another company that launched here in the district called Cove, which is almost like a Starbucks for tech companies or just different types of businesses. Their model is they open multiple locations around the city. I think they're about 4 right now, and you can kind of check into any one of them, and you kind of drop in rates, and it's just very different. Whereas some of the more traditional models of co-working can have you have either a dedicated office space or a dedicated desk or a kind of drop-in desk, and they all have different rates based on that. So I think they're interesting models, and what we have found is that each of them have their own personality. We have one called Canvas that's really more for creatives, and you can have your dogs there and things like that, right? And then you have others that are just focused on only tech companies, where other environments like WeWork, only about 20% of them are tech, but you're surrounded by attorneys, other small businesses, so that you can kind of cross-pollinate resources.
So these provide office resources at an incredibly small rate. I heard maybe $300 a month for some of them, if that. So
Sometimes
that certainly
less.
cuts down on your startup costs. Each one of you have different objectives. So what do you look for in a potential client, per se? What are the attributes that you need to find for a business that you'll do business with? Tia, you want to start off?
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to. We look for people we can help. As I mentioned earlier, we're a boutique startup accelerator, and a boutique startup accelerator is one where entrepreneurs come and they're all working on a common craft. So our focus is on ultra-high bandwidth businesses. In Chattanooga, we have the largest footprint of ultra-high-speed broadband users in the country. And so what we're trying to do is bring entrepreneurs who are interested in the broadband platform of the future to come in and test applications on our test market. So all of our entrepreneurs will be working in the same subject area. Last year, our focus was 3D printing, and we were the only 3D printing startup accelerator in the U.S. And so we had entrepreneurs from all across the 3D printing industry come and share equipment and work together and collaborate and come up with new business models. So for us, we look really closely at the people we can help the most. We can help ultra-high bandwidth businesses because we have the largest test market in Chattanooga. Last year, we have a really deep manufacturing legacy in Chattanooga, so additive manufacturing made sense for us. And so it's really important for us to bring in people that we can actually move forward. Our organization works with early stage companies who are moving through the seed capital phase to seek angel capital. So those are the big priorities for us.
It's interesting that you said that early stage precedes angel, and in many businesses, you've got to get angel first to get started. So that's not true in terms of high ultra bandwidth areas?
It absolutely will be. We're going to have to start from the very beginning with a lot of these businesses. But one interesting thing we're going to do this year is we are moving toward the entrepreneurship model. So we're partnering with a lot of large corporations, and they have committed to presenting ideas that they want startups to solve. And so we will be working through the business modeling process very heavily with our teams.
Great. Keith, who you're looking for?
Well, actually, as an entrepreneur, when you think of incubators, if you think of the natural sense of a child being born, they place this child in an incubator. This incubator simulates an optimum environment for that child to develop. It's optimum. They have humidifiers and everything. So if I'm an entrepreneur and you place me in an incubator, the culture of even capital, you have to foster a culture that demonstrates social equity, that all entrepreneurs are equal, and that we all have access, we all have the same competencies and skill sets to innovate. So the incubator should be incubating innovation. So what drives our innovation? Is it empathy that leads into us defining the requirements of the needs of a community? We ideate together, we prototype those ideas, and we test them. So if we come into, like we were talking earlier, and they were talking about deal sizes, 50,000 or 100,000. The National Venture Capital Association's report, the average seed deal size is $3.5 million in 2014. So is it geographic based on 50,000 or 100,000, or is it value? So when we look at valuations, the first question that was asked to me by a VC or an incubator, what is your valuation, what is your burn rate? So how are valuations based? There are national standards on how you calculate valuations. So most entrepreneurs don't understand that. So if you say 100,000, what's my valuation? I'm giving, most incubators charge between 7 to 10% equity when you participate in an incubator. What is the cost of the equity? And so we have to incubate this company and provide knowledge and insight at every level. So I innovate my idea, I develop a product or service. How do I get it to market? I have to understand the cost of it. How do I scale it? VCs came to me and said, the first question, what is my exit? I'm going to help you ideate. You're going to build this. In 3 years, I'm out. What do you do? And so I think these are great discussions today. And so on the incubation side, we have to develop the whole entrepreneur, not just his creative side. He's going to create a great product or service, and the companies don't end up in our communities. So if you gave me $5 million and brought me to Silicon Valley, I'm not bringing the money back to the community to hire people who look like me. I went to Silicon Valley. They told me, we're not ready for you. I went out, I worked with a product launch specialist. I was 25 years as a business consultant, so I knew the business side. I knew the capital side. And all I'm saying is, how do we incubate businesses within their communities, capitalize them, then I hire people within that community and develop those competencies and build a community-based incubator there.
So are you looking for entrepreneurs, partners, strategic partners, investors that are going to invest in the community first?
We actually pulled a community together, the public sector, public-private partnerships, and our goal is we preserve the equity of this firm that we are going to build the next Google, and we're going to take billions of dollars and invest into the community if we can preserve the equity. So we had to be very creative in who we partnered with, and I think you mentioned earlier, strategic partnerships. They are key. Companies through corporate social responsibility has millions of dollars that they're investing into this movement of corporate social responsibility. So how do we tap into those resources to be able to understand the needs of a community? How do we solve problems? Why do we build technology? We are helping people live better. And so our company's vision is to use technology and broadband and the adoption of it, that people can solve community-based problems at the community level. And we're going to create an economic base. You can't develop a community just socially, even intellectually. Socially, environmentally, and economically. There has to be investment.
Cash.
Yes. And someone has to build a product, take that money, and be willing to give it back. Someone said trust. So if we never had the money, who will we trust to provide capital to our communities? So if it's based on trust, and we've never been at the table, how will we gain access?
That's an interesting question. That's a whole nother panel. Aaron, you've got many programs Pick one, and do you have to be a DC-based company organized in the district? Do you look at companies from around the country? I know you have a international partnership with one of your Challenge Cup programs, but for your basic programs, what are you looking for?
Well, I think the overall goal is to attract, grow, and retain large and small tech companies and innovative companies into the district. I mean, that's ultimately the goal. So there are a number of programs, you're right, that we participate in and support in order to make that happen. There are, what we actually look for is really companies that are going to help attract talent to the district, right? Because at the end of the day, and this is why we're very supportive of Code for Progress and other programs like that, where we're helping to provide skills to a diverse population. I think the district is positioned as such to really have one of the most diverse ecosystems for innovation, just by the nature of the demographics, also by the fact that we have so many different. We have all these embassies here. We have this international community. We're this international gateway. So we really look at it very differently. I think there are a number of jurisdictions that look at or position themselves to how can they be the next Silicon Valley, and that's not really our focus. We're looking to be something very different. So when we're talking to companies, I'll focus on our tech fund as an example. One of the things that we wanted to do is really help companies who don't have that opportunity, have that friends and family round. And we wanted to help give companies a chance to really thrive that otherwise may be passed over, but had amazing potential and, to be sustainable and definitely support the district's goals that I mentioned before. And also really we have an opportunity to, through this program, and I will mention similarly to the other Aaron's comments, our program was non-dilutive, right? So we didn't take any equity out of the companies for those grants. We wanted a program that the most that we asked is that you didn't have to be a district company. You could be a company outside of the district. We wanted to use it as an attraction tool at the same time. But what we did ask is that it was location-based. So you needed to move into the district and you needed to move to the tech corridor. But the reason for that is that we wanted to really create an environment that people could see a very diverse group of innovators who, if just with even a small amount of support, without taking equity, because as you talked about, equity is such an important part of a company. And when that's taken and diluted so early in the game, it really hinders them from the growth potential. So I think what we're looking for, ultimately, is really for sustainable companies, large and small, to really help support the goals of the district, to really participate in the innovation economy.
Amy, I've long been an admirer of Springboard. You've had great successes domestically and internationally, and you mentioned you have quite a few serial entrepreneurs. What are you looking for in a new entrant entrepreneur?
That's a real secret sauce, And I think everybody really has a different way of identifying. People used to say to us back in the day, don't focus on the women leaders, focus on the company. And we said, well, we're really about both. And, in respect to what everybody's doing, what you have here is an ecosystem that we didn't have for women and minorities. We had to build that ecosystem. And so, I think we've come of age at a certain point now where we have leaders and serial entrepreneurs who understand the process, who now are willing to kind of look at the broader community that we all operate in and begin to help and make investments in those new companies. So when they come and look at our new entrants, they're looking for people who are coachable, who have, that focus and perspective of a bigger picture rather than just their own business. They're focused on the success of their business, but they also realize that it's all about the ecosystem. It's all about how you participate in this entrepreneurial economy. And that's pretty exciting for us because, the bottom line about, when I started out my career was that women didn't help other women. And that was a really big problem.
And in most
for-
instances, women were not in the position to help
That's right.
other women.
They weren't in positions of influence or expertise to be able to help others. But even those that were got there by themselves. And we kind of looked around at different populations and said, how did they get involved? How did they build infrastructure? How did they get that ecosystem supporting each other? And so we decided that was the first thing we needed to do, was to find capable entrepreneurs, people who are capable of being entrepreneurs, and begin to start to form a web around them of expertise. And it's easier said than done. But obviously, with the support of governments, which has been wonderful, and the support of, the folks realizing that, wow, maybe I'm missing some deals out there. Maybe I'm, and I love what Aaron was saying, because we've been looking at modifying our whole proposal to say, who's going to buy these things? Where are the real partnerships? Mm-hmm. The more you develop partnerships and relationships, the better those connections can happen. And I would say that that's probably the whole purpose for the success, is proving that there are capabilities. And then I'll say one more thing. The issues of coaching is really, really important. Entrepreneurs are really lone wolves, and they go out there and they know what they want to do, and they hear a lot of people who are naysayers. But I think the most successful entrepreneurs that I've seen are those who have the ability to absorb, filter, and respect. All of the input that they're getting from a variety of different people, and being able to manage those relationships well. And so that's kind of an intangible thing, but you know it when you see it. And so what I always look for from people is their ability to tap into the networks and to respect the networks, and then to participate in supporting, how we've built our networks. Those who, prefer to do it alone probably won't be successful, and, are not the ones that are going to help the rest of us create that entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Great. Leah, what are you looking for?
Yeah, so when we select a fellow, we're actually opening our application this week for the 2015 cohort. We had a 2% selection rate last year, and a lot of folks thought it was because they had to have coding experience or something like that. Actually, you're not likely to get in if you do have coding experience, because what we are looking for is folks who have a proven track record of being community organizers, and being able to demonstrate that they have exhibited leadership in the community and have exhibited leadership and innovation in community organizing. So there's 3 reasons for that. The first is actually related to what they want to build. So I've always kind of bemoaned the idea that there is no category on the App Store for social justice apps. There's so much we could do, and most of the progressive movement that I come out of as a field director on legislative campaigns, I actually just built my own tech. I was a developer happening to be working on anti-poverty legislation in Ohio. But was building my own stuff, because generally what we are talked to about in the progressive movement is better algorithms for matching to voters and finding, deeper lists and so on. But almost none of the technology has a way for the users to talk back to our organizations and do things with them. And so if you think that that's meaningless, you should look at Black Twitter. And see that when we develop new things, it really, really changes the landscape. So I actually just flew back in yesterday from the Sundance Film Festival. I was there to run their hack dance. Hackathon, they call it hack dance, right?
And we're not talking about illegal hacking here. We're talking something
different,
right?
So that word has changed
Remember,
a lot.
you're at the FCC, okay?
Yeah. So the word hacking has changed a lot, right? But when I first was trained, it was really about security and hardware and computers, and now we use that word. There's social good hackathons all the time that are about what we mean hacking together a solution through an existing system, framework, machine, and throwing some code together. So the team that actually won is a group that we've been working with here in DC called Mission Launch, which is all about creating job opportunities for women returning from prison. So I became friends with the founder of that because we both share the kind of life circumstance of having incarcerated parents. And when you get that group of people together, you want to talk innovative? Let's talk about poor people. people who've been in prison, people who are people of color, because we have to figure out how to navigate a world that wasn't necessarily built for us, right? And so the idea they came up with won the hackathon, and one of the judges was sitting there, and this was like an LA person with like a lot of money, and she was kind of like, well, I don't know, I didn't really see like a killer feature, you know, because the code was actually quite simple. And I had to say to her, I need you to rethink innovation. I need you to be a little more innovative about how you think about innovation, because the killer feature here is that it's going to help reduce poverty. It's not Flappy Bird. And so the only people who know what to build are the people who are coming out of the communities that need to do this. And those communities are markets and user bases. And so they know that, no one else does. That came from them. So that's one reason. We want to build things that are fundamentally different. The second is that we have a huge diversity problem in tech right now. And in my opinion, it's not enough for us to put just more brown and black people or women in. It's important for us to have both white allies, male allies, and people who are skilled in having these conversations and are at a place in their kind of identity development where they are able to advocate for themselves and others. So a whole third of our training program is about that. What is it like to be in the workplace that we have today? And we practice having conversations when microaggressions pop up at work, which is a daily thing. And when I say microaggression, I mean that situation where someone is not doing something that anyone would point out and be like, wow, that was really racist. Little things that cut at you all day long that are very significant in messing with your efficacy. And so our continuing program after the residency, now that they got the syntax of the code down, is almost always about, whoa, how do I deal with these people at work? Like, what? They don't even realize what they're saying. So for us, we want to bring in people who, I always say that I think it takes less time to teach coding syntax than to teach and develop a racial consciousness. So I want to bring in folks who have demonstrated that they're used to having difficult conversations and working both with allies and the populations that we were wanting to uplift, so that when they go into the workplace, they have some practice at handling this situation. They can advocate for a coworker, and I think that really changes what's possible in the tech space that really, really wants to bring in more diverse folks but isn't necessarily ready to handle us yet, or doesn't think about that as something that has to train white people and men as well. And the third thing is actually, I think, very much related to why we're having a conversation about incubators, accelerators, and other kinds of spaces in the first place, because I actually think space is extraordinarily important in diversifying tech. So for us, the cohort structure matters. And the fact that they're together for 5 months, 9 to 5, actually more like 9 to 9, working together, seeing all people of color and women, low-income folks, queer folks, in that same space, and being very protective about that space as believing that all of those identities have inherent worth. You have inherent worth because you are a black woman, because you are a Latino, queer, undocumented person, right? That there is not something wrong with you by virtue of that identity. And I think that is so important, because the reason that we have a gap in who is in tech is because there has been systematic structural divestment in our communities over history. And the only way we will counteract that is by reinvesting. Sometimes that's money and sometimes that's time. And so my first coding job was 15 years ago, teaching coding to white Indiana farm boys. And there's a lot of kind of, at Purdue University where I went to do my undergrad before I went to grad school and did this policy thing. And I was teaching engineers. I'm a developer. And you will often see a difference in how people go about coding, right? So for those guys, there would be an error in their program, and they'd be like, I must have put a semicolon in the wrong place. For our folks, this is what happens. There's an error. I can't do this. No one like me has ever been able to do this. I don't really know. And you're like, it is actually a comma that is out of place. But what this tells me is that perhaps the hardest thing we actually have to do in training techies is the hardest thing we always do in our lives, which is how do we change the stories we have about ourselves? Very difficult. And I actually don't think it's simple to pull a brick off my own back. I really think we need other people's help to do that and then pave a road with it. And so I think that having a space that is really for us is very, very, very important. And so I want people there who know what it's like to build community, because we have the fellowship, but then also this thing that has happened in spite of what we intended to do is that every Thursday, and you all are invited, at Bread for the City, we do a community hack night. We thought it was going to be for coders. They brought their kids and grandparents, whatever, So we have this majority people of color women space that I don't make calls to get people to come to. It's free. And I really think people want to be around each other and be able to walk into a tech space and say, I have a question about this code, and you're going to think that I have a question about code versus I might be a stupid person because of my DNA, right? So that's a long answer to why I think selecting folks who come in with a community consciousness and understand issues of social justice are extraordinarily important. We have to build those spaces, and I actually, people say that that's a really interesting opinion, and I don't think it's an opinion. I think it's work that has to be done.
Can I add a piece onto that? That's really, basically covers the whole waterfront. But there's also another aspect of this that we're now able to do is once you've established that foundation, there's also now sort of the virtual. Maybe that's what you were talking about,
Excubator.
Yeah. And what we found is that if you get out of your community, if you get out of your area and sort of look at the whole entire global approach to things, sort of like what the Challenge Cup is doing, bringing all kinds of solutions together, and people who wouldn't necessarily know each other. So we've kind of taken a more virtual approach, to creating the village. And so where I think that in-person is incredibly important to build those relationships, I also think the virtual aspect and the ability with technology to be able to connect so personally these days really does help a lot. And so that we can't, the actual in-house people living together for a while is really important. It builds that camaraderie. But also that whole virtual aspect of reaching out and getting validation through others as well is really important as well.
And Erin, you've been so patient. Your business model is quite unique. You don't take equity. Keith actually said that Accelerated the standard is 7 to 10% equity. Obviously, the ecosystem is still there, but your business model is different. Can you explain who you're looking for and how that works for you?
Yeah, so I'm a local boy coming here from D.C. Grew up in this region. My father, in fact, taught intercultural communication over at Howard for 30 years until last year. He just retired. And so a lot of the stuff that you're talking about resonates with me. I deal with the same sort of issues that you're talking about, but on a more global issue. Dealing with, I'm Indian by birthright and half Indian, half German. And so that culture, you're dealing with Russians, they have a different type of culture. You're dealing with Swedes, they have a different type of culture. You're dealing with Indiana as a different culture than Atlanta. I mean, I don't see it so much as a race issue for me in the way that I do things or the way that we do things, or gender issue. It's more of a communication issue and cultural issues that just span the globe. So, things that we have here are ecosystems that can't communicate with other ecosystems. And when you look at investing, even that's an ecosystem. It's people without money communicating with people who have money. And it has nothing to do with whether you're white, black, or Jewish or anything. It has to do with your frame of reference and who you're communicating with and their frame of reference. So going back to answering the question you actually asked, one of the things that I've learned from growing up in D.C. is to have plausible deniability. And so what we do with that is we build relationships with decision makers who make decisions for us. Now, in the end, we have ultimate say in what or whom we take into our groups, but we design a system that does not allow the decision makers to know the race, creed, color, or otherwise of the people who are applying until the very, very last step, which is the final 10 people do face-to-face interviews with the entire board. But that's narrowed down from hundreds of applicants who nobody ever knows anything about. And the reason that we do the plausible deniability approach is, I like to use this example. I won't name names, but it's maybe a little known fact, but for people who don't know, there's something called medication adherence. If you take a drug, pharmaceutical companies and everybody, in fact, your doctor wants you to take that drug. So if you have high blood pressure, you need to take your high blood pressure medication every day so you don't have high blood pressure. And if you take it for 20 days instead of 30 out of each month, that means there's 10 days that A, you're at risk, and B, for pharmaceutical companies, that's money that they're not getting because you're not taking their meds. So it means that you're filling your prescription a third lower or slower than you would otherwise. So when I talk to pharmaceutical companies about, and I won't name who, but a couple of them, said, yeah, we won't look at medication adherence companies. We will not invest, we will not partner with, and we will not do any work with the medication adherence companies, which makes no sense at all to me, because you'd think pharmaceutical companies would be very interested in products that would help people take their medication on time for medical reasons and for financial reasons. But they've said that they will not do that. That's a really key factor in sort of the design of what we do, because now we don't take any medication adherence companies because they're the ones who are making the decisions. When I wander around to other health accelerators around the country, almost 80-90% of them have medication adherence companies in their portfolio. And when you talk to the companies about who they're going to sell to, they say, we're going to sell to pharma companies. And clearly, they have no idea that pharma companies won't work with them, won't buy their product, and won't use them. And so we use decision makers to decide for us rather than we make the decision ourselves. And that's how we solve the problem of getting companies into our cohorts.
And you have a rolling application process?
We do. And especially by virtue of the fact that I run so many of these, it's rolling all over the world. But yes, the answer is yes. We're trying to get to, in each accelerator, about 2 cohorts a year.
The excubator model, which is relatively new and still evolving, seems to be a combination of incubator, accelerator, but without the selective application process. Basically, if you have the money to pay for the services of an excubator who may have, like Aaron says, certain companies that are partners with you, or you have discounts on services, whether it's legal, financial, copy, workspace, etc., you can pay for them. But it's evolving. Interesting article in Entrepreneur Magazine dated in March of this year. Will new excubator model increase startup success rates? Still unknown, still evolving, but something to look at if you're interested in an excubator and not qualified for an incubator, a selective incubator or selective accelerator model. Just to talk about that. Let's talk about specific advice, particularly for minorities and women-owned businesses, which, as you know, suffer through long-standing discriminatory practices, whether it's finance, whether it is even getting an appointment, getting your foot in the door, getting treated credibly. What type of advice do you give to women-owned, minority-owned businesses in regards to whether it's financial planning? What type of business should they form? Part of this panel is entity formation and incubation. Are there certain models, business models, that work best for minority-owned and women-owned business? Or does it really matter what type of business they're in? Anyone can answer this question. Anyone want to start? Keith?
I'd like to start. My background, again, is in business. And so when you look at a value chain, when I became a technologist, I knew how to develop requirements for developing solutions. So how do we then take a value chain and convert raw materials into something useful that people can use to solve problems? And I think it starts with, I would advise any entrepreneur is to understand your own market value. You have to understand what it is you've been gifted with. You will sit in front of some investors, not all, and they will dictate your valuation in front of you with no thought. I'll give you $1 million. I own this. It happened to me on multiple occasions. So I suggest that you have to take the time, conduct the due diligence to understand your value. Secondly, how do you then get that or shape your ideas and get them to market? Because there's a product life cycle. So your product would be, of course, introduced to the market. It's going to peak. So usually we decline and we exit the market. But companies like Mercedes, they just keep saying we're adding value to the vehicle. And they keep adding more value to their product offerings. And so for us, I started this company 10 years ago. I spent the last 8 years, I went to China, Silicon Valley, Boston. I dealt with investment banks, valuation specialists for 3 years. What's the computation for building valuations? How do you build one? Because your equity is going to be diluted so fast based on that concept of valuation, and if you don't understand it, you've spent 20 years building this brand and it's gone in a year. And so I'm not trying to be negative about venture capital or capital in general. We need it. So to an entrepreneur, for me and our company and the sacrifice my wife and I made, we made a conscious decision. How do we use technology to enable broadband adoption? So we're building all of these tools, right? And the question I've heard in multiple conferences is adoption. Why aren't people using it? And I think our colleague at the very end stated, how do we get people to use these tools to enhance quality of life? So when I went to Silicon Valley, there's entrepreneurs there and innovators who are in their 20s, who've, of course, gone to Ivy League schools. I have 25 years of business experience, much more than most. So he has a great idea, but he doesn't have the business acumen to scale it. So I think for us, we have to be able to take the technical know-how, most importantly, empathy, human empathy, why we do what we do. And so the culture of innovation and how we can establish for these new businesses an environment that doesn't destroy their self-esteem, their image. If we're going in a meeting and we're asking for money, it's as though we've postured ourselves to be always dependent on someone on the exterior. And that's why we have to build companies, sustain them. We just can't get to an exit and sell them. We have to sustain them and build our own fund. And when I say our, those that, not just blacks, those that have been deprived or in an environment where there are disparities when it comes to access and intellectual knowledge. So one guy told me that for a new business owner, you've got to go to Silicon Valley. That's where all the tech resources are. He was saying that's where the minds are. You can't find them in Tampa. You can't find them in Miami. Silicon Valley is where all of the ideas are. So I posed this question. Well, midwives in the South gave birth to babies with no degree, no medical background, and my mom raised 10 boys, and we were born with a midwife. No degree, no medical tools, and we're all here today. What I'm saying is innovation can't be stifled by a structured system. All of us in this room have great ideas. We have to build the infrastructure to get those ideas to market. So I think we have to develop them holistically.
Well, we know there's tech in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Right? So some of the resources to find a company's valuation or tech valuation, do you offer some of those resources or point people in the right direction? Do you bring people together with mentorships or relationships that they can find that information?
Absolutely. Chattanooga is a mid-sized city, and so a lot of organizations in town, we really have to work together. We're trying to do these really big things with broadband, but there are only so many of us that live there, and so even when we're building out our entrepreneurial ecosystem, it can't just be the company lab. It can't be just our Gig Tank program. We work with law firms, with accounting firms, with HR firms, and professionals all over the community to make sure we have a strong ecosystem of mentors that can help our entrepreneurs move through the process so that they can reach a higher valuation. And a lot of the times, if an entrepreneur wants to participate in our program, we may offer, or one of our partnering funds may offer $15,000 in initial seed investment. Sometimes they don't take it. They don't take the money because they want to take some time and really improve their business and then go for something a little bit bigger. So yeah, absolutely. We really, really have to rely on each other. We also run into each other a lot around town. So it's kind of forced us to have to work together. But I would say, yeah, I think having a lot of organizations coming together and providing these different services, these different areas of expertise is pretty critical to the movement we're building in Chattanooga. Because, again, a lot of our organizations are very small.
And I encourage audience questions. We've got one here. Follow-up to that for Aaron and Amy. Do you have resources or invest in nonprofit women-led tech organizations?
No, because our focus really has been on the nonprofit side about looking at scalable growth businesses, and that's a whole different end of things. The nonprofit. I mean, I'm a nonprofit, and so I know how you sustain and grow organizations of that level. But our mission was really to work with companies that would build billion-dollar businesses. And how can we create a whole entire system that allowed them to have access to the right resources that support them? I mean, we used to call ourselves an accelerator, a forum, whatever it is. But honestly, we're now become a resource hub. Mm-hmm. So anybody who is coming with questions or with the incredible ability to build large businesses wherever they are should know about the resources everywhere that support them, whether it's digital health or whether or not it's wanting to plant in the District of Columbia or in Chattanooga, where you really have to know who your ecosystem is. And so we've kind of become that facilitator in a way.
Aaron, does the district offer programs for nonprofit women-led tech organizations?
Well, we do offer programs that support. So there's a number of different ways. A couple of things is we have a Department of Small and Local Business Development that works with small businesses, and there's a program, Kaufman-led program that is called Fast Track, and there's one specifically called Tech Ventures. So some of the programs aren't necessarily whether or not you're a nonprofit or for-profit, but the resources are still available. And then we also have a small business resource center within our Department of Consumer Regulatory Affairs that gives that one-on-one advice, to go back to your original question, which is, how do you set yourself up? What does it look like? That sort of thing. There's another program that's not necessarily district-led, but we support, and I actually sit on the advisory board, is the Halcyon Incubator, which is interesting because it's for social entrepreneurs, so they can be for-profit or nonprofit. But what I really love about their model, too, is they provide housing as a part of their program, and along with office space. And I think for, when we're talking about entrepreneurs who, may not have the initial funding or have any sort of barriers, things like housing are a huge component. And, I think that one thing that I wanted to go back to your original question, just kind of about what resources are there and how we match these resources up, especially for women and minorities. I think that the district, that was really something that was a focus even when I came on board. I mean, for many people, they don't realize that, my background was that I was one of those serial entrepreneurs. I was somebody who had tried to start a tech company in the Valley years ago, when you're right, there were not any programs for women, and there definitely weren't programs for people of color. And so, trying to get into Y Combinator and trying to do these different programs, and, no one, and also as a woman, somebody not really understanding the business model, because the target demographic were not men. So it's like, why do we need this? And so trying to get somebody to just even understand your concept. So, that actually led me to come from the Valley, to come to D.C., to get in policy, to go to Howard, and actually now I know your father was one of my professors, which I didn't know that connection. So not only do we share a name, but we we have that other connection, to focus on policy around women and minority tech entrepreneurs. And when coming into my role into the district was really to bring that entrepreneurial perspective, to say, how do we connect resources to those in need? And so one of the things that I try to do is offer, and this, it's above and beyond our job. It's, doing office hours at a lot of the different co-working spaces to give that advice that's very customized and very specific, because everyone's needs are very different. There are programs that people don't even realize, whether it's, here in the district, there's Fish and Richardson, who, offer an IP program that they take a small amount of equity, but will help you get your company started. And it's called Fish Step, or Tandem Legal, who will do something similar. There's a lot of law firms that you don't have to have upfront cash in order to figure out how to set up your business. But there are a number of resources that are available that I think once people take the time to get to know or get involved in the ecosystem. And I think here in the district we have something very unique. We have a very large meetup called the DC Tech Meetup Group that meets at the public library, MLK's public library.
Leah's shaking her head. I think you've attended a couple of those?
I've spoken a couple of them.
Yes,
Okay.
spoken of a couple. And there's more than, and every month or every other month when they have it, it's more than like 500 plus people. It's an opportunity to pitch. It's an opportunity to get involved in the ecosystem, an opportunity to learn about resources. And what I love is when we go to these events, no matter what it is, DC has just such a diverse ecosystem that there really is so many different ways to get matched up and find out about resources. And they are here, and they're either low cost or no cost.
One of the things that we heard on the previous panel was that having skin in the game, having a personal financial investment in your company is critical. Also, in terms of having a good management team. How important are those two things for your businesses, for example, for your companies, for your organizations? Do you help someone find a good management team, or do they have to come with one? And having skin in the game, particularly if you are African American or of other unserved communities where you don't have the same financial wealth and resources historically in your family, what kind of incentives, what kind of financial support? We heard about some of your tech fund. What other funds or what other money is out there? If you can go quickly, we've probably got about 5 more minutes. Aaron?
So I wear another hat, which is I'm a general partner in the Cross Valley Fund, which is named for Crossing the Valley of Death, which we mentioned before.
Okay.
Which is a post-accelerator fund where companies coming out of incubators and accelerators would get, non-dilutive capital to help bridge them to the point where they could get to a Series A or at least a later angel round. And so we... In stating all that, I think I lost what answer would you like? Because I can go about 40 ways here. So,
what kind of financial support do you provide?
So we provide somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple $100,000 to up to $750,000, which can be used as a match against a lot of government programs and things, which we also work with. My partner, John Gozier, is actually Time Magazine just posted him as one of the 12 most influential or African Americans to watch in this country, I think, number 6 or something like that. Don't tell him that I know that because he gets a big head. But yeah, so
we'll send him the tape.
What was that?
We'll send him this tape.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. That'll do great. So we do that with the intent that, again, oftentimes with early stage companies, they are really focused on equity. They're really focused on their valuation. They're really focused on a lot of things that honestly don't matter at all. To take it to a 35,000-foot view here, I mean, as Javier said before, I walked around here before I came to sit on this panel, and I looked at every one of the entrepreneurs that are here today, and I tried to figure out whether, without saying a word to any one of them or learning anything about them, whether I could figure out what they did in about 15, 30, 20, 30 seconds. And the answer is 70% of the time, no. And the issue is that I don't think it's an issue of money, it's an issue of race, it's an issue of any of those sorts of things. I think it comes back to communication. I think the one thing that we, the gift that I can give you, like Bill was saying, the gift that I can, give to you guys is if nobody's going to invest in you if they don't know what you do. Nobody's going to give you money if they don't know what you do. And a great idea is a great idea no matter who you are and what you look like. And so, yes, there are some needs to make it easier for certain ideas to get out there. I get that. But even still, in order for us to give you money, in order for us to make our investments, we need to know what you do. And it needs to be easy for us to understand.
And does your program help build a management team, or does the
it
entrepreneur have to come
we
with
do
one?
We invest in a management team above and beyond everything else. And the management team is more, do you know what you're doing and why do you know what you're doing? So is it something that you saw somebody else talk about? Well, that's probably not firsthand knowledge, and that's not as interesting to somebody who's been in the trenches and made mistakes. We like failures. Somebody was talking about that. I think the commissioner was talking about that. We love failures. You learn a ton more from failing than you do from successes. And so I'd rather have somebody with 50 failures under their belt than one big success. And I will stand by that. In the last 25 years of doing this in venture capital work, I will stand by that statement always.
Now, Amy, I know traditional venture capital funds, management team is critical. Do you help build a management team or work with the entrepreneur to find good people?
Here's the thing. That entrepreneur has to be able to attract a management team that's relevant to where they need to take that company to the next milestone, which is always a little different. I mean, anytime you build a business, I would like to say something about the skin in the game. This was a big aha moment for me. I ran a federal commission years ago on women's business ownership, and we were sitting there trying to bring bankers and women entrepreneurs, women business owners together. And one of the women business owners had said, I don't have any money, and these bankers won't give me any money. And the banker said, well, what have you put in so far? What kind of collateral do you have? And the woman said, well, I don't want to put my money in here because, I need it for my family or I need it for another purpose. And the person said, well, if you're not willing to go all in for this business, why should we? And it was that moment of clarity for me that realized is that it's, you're asking people to invest in you and you're not willing to put whatever it takes to make your dream happen. And so, we kind of look at it as, learn, and just as Aaron said, you got to learn to speak investor. What are they looking for? The moment you understand their language, you can begin to start to see the commonalities that happen. And honestly, not all the time that we, are born, we know how to speak investor. And so you have to learn that language and realize, is that for you? It may not be for you. It may not be the path that you want to go through. And so you have to evaluate that, understand what the person needs to hear. On the management team thing, it's really about, can you attract a successful team? And if you can, then that means that you've figured out what the communication and the language is, you've figured out what the pathway is, and people will be attracted to you. And then, of course, you go to Code for Progress and you learn all of that, and then it's a big success, right?
That's where you get your CTO.
That's right.
Keith, you have something to add?
I just wanted to add on the communication, and then when Ms. Amy was saying about scalability and multiples, you hear that a lot. So the investor language that you just referenced, where is the investor glossary that we can disseminate to communities all over the country where people can, when they come to the table, he said communication, if I walk through the room, only 70%. What if I had investors at these tables? Could an entrepreneur determine what you're offering in relation to value, its benefit to the company, and how I scale my business? It's the same on both ends. So when we build a relationship, it has to be mutual expectation. Investors have to be as transparent as they've actually compelled us as entrepreneurs to be, which we've sacrificed home. We've got all the skin in. Right. We need to make sure that we're engaging others who have the same level of transparency.
One last question and we'll close. What can the FCC do to foster investment in small businesses, minority women-owned tech companies? Follow-up question from the audience. This was more directed to Tia. How do you effectively increase bandwidth? I mean, we're looking at the net neutrality proceeding. We're looking at the new definition of high-speed bandwidth, which is being increased in terms of speeds. What are some of the things that the Commission can do to foster? Anyone can participate.
I'll start. We think that fast lanes and slow lanes will stymie innovation, and they're bad for startups. For startups to have to pay more to access this utility that we think, should be available to everyone, we're not going to see a whole lot of growth. We're not going to see a whole lot of innovation from the small guys. And so we think it's really important that everyone has equal access to the spectrum. And we also think that broadband should be widely available. Now, however that happens, whether it's, allowing municipal utilities to provide the service like they do in Chattanooga, or through private companies actually investing in building out the infrastructure, we don't care. We just want more people to have access, and it's really important for us to develop that next generation of business applications that everyone has access to broadband. And so that's pretty much where we stand on that. Feel very strongly about it.
Anyone else? And would you each be open to putting your contact information available to OCBO, because we've got some people that may want to follow up in the audience? And I also suggest that maybe OCBO can put the links to your respective organizations and maybe even a calendar of some of your upcoming events. I know you've got application deadlines. You've got a couple of big events coming up. You've got your Challenge Cup that I think applications are coming through again. There's a host of things. Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank these panelists for a very informative and information session. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Now that I've volunteered your website.
Yes. You know.
Won't be the first time.
No.
Thank
Absolutely. You. Feel free. Thank you so much. A hand again for our panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you for lending your expertise. Janelle, thank you. An amazing job. This is a wonderful panel. It is 12:30. So a couple of housekeeping details. We're going to break for lunch. My staff is going to be around. I think I've said to everybody, we're in a little bit of a food desert. But we do have our CAP Cafe, so a number of our staff members are around. They're going to be able to escort you here. We've got a secure room, so other than leaving money on the floor, I think it's pretty safe to leave your things. But we'll reconvene at 1:15 for the third panel, and then we're going to do the tech fair. I think if you haven't had a chance to grab some of the surveys, please do. And you can fill those out and give those to us before the tech fair portion of the day starts. But please do catch one of my staff members if you're going to eat here, and they'll escort you to Capitol Cafe, which is on the courtyard level. They'll have to escort you back in. If you leave the building, you'll just have to come back through security. So thank you very much. Let's get started.
We're over here.
Yes. What's that? Oh. And well, you know what? So we should do Karen Beverly. Can you raise your hand if you all haven't met Karen? Karen has the fast pitch schedules, so please do check in with Karen if you get an opportunity. We're going to get back here at 1:15. Okay. So, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. You know what, everybody? It is 1:20. We're gonna go ahead and get started. We've got all of our panelists up. So if we could start to kind of get settled. So this last panel is How Did You Do That? Road Mapping Success. I'm excited about the folks that we have here. Dr. Nicole Turner-Lee has graced us with her presence, is going to be moderating this panel. She is the Vice President, Chief Research and Policy Officer at Minority Media Telecommunications Council, but that has changed, hasn't it? And you'll give us the new and correct moniker, right? I will. Okay. So Nicole is a great friend of the agency as well. Is going to be taking over moderation. We have Tony Bell, CEO of A Unity System, joining us. Lisa J. Johnson, President and CEO of SafetyCom. Thank you. Timo Selvaraj, co-founder of SearchBlocks. Marissa Jennings, founder of Social Girls. And we have Cleveland Spears, who's General Manager of IM4 Radio. Thank you for coming. Also, Jeannie Barton, who's VP and Director, Online Behavioral Advertising Programs and Mobile Marketing Initiatives. So let's give our panelists a hand, and we welcome Dr. Nicole Turner-Lee up here, and we're going to get started. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. All right, so I have to correct first, because we did change our name last week to the Multicultural Media, Telecom, and Internet Council, but the I is silent, so we are still MMTC for those of you that know us. As Chanel Trigg, did I get that right? Because you know my boss would kill me if I said it wrong. I want to say thank you to the FCC, to Akpo, Tom Reed, the team at Akpo. I'm really excited to moderate this particular panel because at MMTC our interest is focused on preserving and expanding minority ownership when it comes to media and telecom industry. So this is a great opportunity. It's much up our alley. We work very closely with Akpo on these kinds of issues. And for those of you that are entrepreneurs and have spoken on previous panels today, I just want to say kudos to you because this is the next big thing when it comes to American and global industries. So you are in the right place at the right time to hear the right people when it comes to this. The panel that we're going to hear from these esteemed folks that are up here is entitled, How Did You Do That? The Road Mapping Success. So, you know, people who know me know that I always kick off with a bit of a story. So I'll start here. Have you ever been someplace and listened to this awesome presentation and whispered to your neighbor, how they do that? Am I speaking to somebody in the crowd? How did they do that? I mean, I do it all the time. I mean, for Christmas, I got a Fitbit. I said, how did they do that? Not that they were doing it for me in particular, but how did they do that? And I met Tony and looked at some of the stuff that he just did as part of the exhibitors and had to ask myself, how did you do that? Particularly for businesses of color who are breaking into this space, you know, where there's been somewhat of a glass ceiling over the last few years. I mean, it's no secret that what we've seen in terms of diversity, in terms of employment, is at one level, but where we see entrepreneurship and business ownership is at probably a similar level when it comes to disparate access. So this panel today, I think, is just a clear representation of the folks who are going to, and I'm going to put it out there, y'all have to let us in on your secrets of how you did that. You promise? Now, if you don't, I'm going to bring it out in the conversation, just forewarning you. So what we're going to do is hear from them a little bit about how they developed the business acumen, the expertise, what led to the ideation of their particular idea that ultimately led into a full-blown business. And we also have the privilege of having Jeannie Barton on the panel, who will also speak a little bit about some of the regulatory constraints and things that we need to keep in mind when we are developing and expanding these businesses. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a question. I'd like for the folks that are owning businesses and innovating in the space, brief headline, more, like the Shark Tank model, like 2 minutes. Give us some background on your company and what your company provides for the audience. Want to start with you, Tony?
Yes, ma'am. Hi, my name is Tony Bell. I'm with a Unity System. And a Unity System is the first minority company to ever launch its own brand of computers in major retail. Established the company in 1999, and by 2001, I was in Staples in 100 stores in Select and on Staples.com. 2002, we launched in 100 stores in Kmart and Kmart.com, and then 2005, Office Depot.com only, and then in 2009 in Walmart. So we've been around nearly 16 years, and next month we relaunch back in Walmart.com, and by the end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter, we will be launching on QVC.
Wow. And how'd you do that? No, kidding. Can't help it. And in particular, where's your company provide, just for the granular detail?
Well, we first started out in the desktop business back in the early, I've been in IT since 82. And yes, and for those trying to figure out my age, I'm 37. But the thing was, in my particular situation was, went to a retail market, and I was looking at a computer, and I was trying to debate whether I wanted to build one, because back in the early days that was the fun thing of trying to build your own computer, or should I buy one? And when I looked at the counter, every last vendor that I saw on that counter was a Caucasian company, and I asked myself the question, wow, what if I would become the first African American or first minority to put a computer in major retail? And that question became my quest. And 18 months later, after I established my company, I got that first opportunity December the 4th of 2001 in Staples. And just kept right on pursuing. But I will I'll say this, how do you do this? You have to step outside of the box, especially when you're trying to compete with the big guys, as they say. And I remember when I was trying to pursue the opportunity and getting that opportunity, you got to keep in mind, these retail markets, they're constantly looking for competitive edges. They're constantly looking for new business, new ways, new ideas. And so I know that they're competing against each other. So what I did was, when I got my packet from Office Depot and my packet from Staples, it was a 30-page document. It wasn't the type of internet situation that we have now. So I took the whole packet from Office Depot and faxed it to Staples and sent Staples paperwork to Office Depot. And then called both of them up and told them that I made a huge mistake. Don't look at it. Just destroy it, shred it, whatever. I can't believe I did that. Knowing that their curiosity would, kill the cat. Mm-hmm. So Staples beat Office Depot to the punch. 30 days later, I was in there.
Wow, that's called a strategic mistake.
Sometimes you have to make those.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. As long as you know you're making it strategically, you're okay. Yeah. Now, Marissa, Social Girls. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, thank you, everyone, for having me here. My name is Marissa Jennings, and I'm the CEO of Social Girls, the first mobile app designed for African American girls ages 13 to 17. We provide positive images and content for girls to see and read in the palm of her hand. Social Girls was actually my senior college project at Bennett College for Women, and I wanted to create a magazine for girls that looked like me and had similar backgrounds as myself, and realized that there was not a magazine. Did some research and realized that magazines and paper was dying, the websites were booming, and that apps were going to become a resource center. Did some more research and realized I needed to create an app for this demographic that spends $96 per month. Mm-hmm. There's over 300,000 mobile apps on Android and iOS platforms, and there's not one designed for this demographic. Wow. So I took my senior college project, went to several meetups. I have several virtual mentors and individuals that truly believe in the concept and the product that I am trying to get on the Android and iOS platforms now. And with the community of people that believe in the concept, I've had the opportunity to attend South by Southwest and be at the White House, just opportunities that I could not imagine. And also, Mr. Cunningham talked about the crowdsource funding campaign, a true testament of being an entrepreneur. I launched a crowdsource funding campaign and did not raise the money that I was seeking to find, but I ended up with a wealth of support and individuals to help me get to where we are now and hopefully on the iOS and Android platform.
Well, I can't wait to ask you all questions. Isn't it? I don't even know what to say. You know, Bennett College.
Yes.
Shout out to Dr. Cole.
Yes.
President
One of my
there.
mentors.
Yeah. Lisa.
Yes.
How did you do that?
Okay, so my name is Lisa Jones Johnson, and I'm the CEO of a company called SafetyCom. And we have launched a personal safety mobile application called PRZ, which stands for Your Personal Red Zone. And essentially, the app came about during the time, about a year ago, we've been doing this for about a year, when we had all of these issues in public safety, everything from the Boston Marathon to Newtown. My background is in digital media, and I started realizing that there was just a lot of things going on in public safety. And so I had a very strong team around me, and we developed this app, and then immediately started getting a lot of traction. Got very involved with some of the White House initiatives around sexual assault on college campuses. And then ultimately, we are now Howard University's public safety app. But the idea really is to make safety social. Because our belief is that social safety is the next evolution of basically the whole social media phenomenon. You know, you started out with Facebook, and then you went to the LinkedIns and the various other platforms, and safety is, by definition, becoming social. And so what we were trying to do, and what we are doing, is merging the typical sort of safety features, the alert buttons and that kind of thing, with the whole social aspect. And so we've gotten a lot of interest, a lot of excitement, and you know, it's something that we're very engaged in.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and what made you want to start that, Lisa? I'm just curious why we have you.
I think, again, I come out of digital media, the entertainment business. I started out as a lawyer. And, of course, being in the entertainment business, you're always very aware of trends.
I said there's hope for lawyers out there to do something creative.
Yes, there's life after being a lawyer. And so you're very aware of trends. You're very aware of what's on the cutting edge. And so, again, I saw that safety was something that was increasingly becoming very important to people, and knowing where their loved ones were, you know, knowing how to communicate with them quickly and easily and in a way that they were going to be able to engage with at the same time. And so that really laid the foundation for what ultimately became our PRZ app.
Wow. Timo?
Good afternoon. My name is Timo Selvaraj, and I'm the co-founder for SearchBlock Software. We sell enterprise search and text analytics software to companies, including federal state agencies. We started the company in 2003. We launched the product actually in 2003. It took over a year to get that initial release of the product. We wrote the software on our own. We are not funded. We grew organically. Our business model is to completely sell online, and we have sold in nearly 30 countries around the world. We have a licensing model. They pay annually a fee to use the software. And we primarily use online methods, and in the more than 300 plus customers, I've actually met face-to-face only one customer. That's because they are in Richmond and I'm based in Richmond. But our goal is to sell across US and Europe. We support 25 different languages, how we do search and text analytics. And our primary marketing channels are online using paid search and SEO and those types of techniques. We are early adopters in pretty much a lot of the things that are out there today. We have used AdWords to grow. We have early adopters in the cloud, so we kind of get on the bandwagon quickly. And then if we are trying to fail, we fail fast and get out of that in terms of features. And we also have like a personal philosophy of how we will build the product. Until a few customers ask for it, we don't really build it because we don't want to build something and make it sit out there unless it's really truly innovating and getting it out there. So we really focus on talking to the customers, see what their needs are, kind of having a lean method of running the company, and we are growing organically today.
Wow. And what made you want to go international? I'm just curious.
I don't think I have a choice, right? When I built a website and I put my product out there, the first sale actually came from Belgium. I thought somebody would buy from the US, but when we sell online, you're putting out a PayPal button or a Stripe out there. They could come and buy from anywhere as long as they have a credit card and they can do the transaction. So we had our first sale from Belgium, and then we have a lot more sales coming from countries like UK and Germany, and we have quite a bit of base here. Here, the base has been slower in terms of growth because it is not the traditional model of selling software where you don't have guys in suits going and pitching the product and building a relationship, whereas it's online. They try it. We give them 30 days, and then that's how they convert. So and this is a unique model we have tried, and I will say we are fairly kind of moving down the growth path here.
Wow, this is fascinating. Jeannie, I'm going to come back to you afterwards, okay?
Absolutely.
You sure?
Yeah, because I'm listening.
Okay.
I'm listening to what all these people are doing, and my questions are kind of building up.
I know, so I want to wait for you, okay? Cleveland, tell us about how you did that.
All right. First, I want to say thank you to the FCC for having me back. Also spoke on the MMTC Council as well. And also shout outs to Joycelyn Tate that helped me get to where I am now. I'm a homeboy. I'm from Washington, D.C. I went to Calvin Coolidge High School. Coolidge in the house? Okay, all right. And also went to Howard University, HU. And how many people are tired of hearing the same songs on the radio? Can you raise your hand? All right. How many people listen to radio still? Regular radio, Trit? Wow.
Now, we're not going to tell you our age, okay?
So enter The Flow. We created a radio network to where we broadcast music that people want to hear. One of my favorite groups is the Foreign Exchange. I don't know if anybody in here knows about the Foreign Exchange, but they're an awesome group. And you never, ever will hear them on commercial radio. So what I did some years back, I created it was kind of crazy. People thought I was really crazy because I started an internet station when it was dial-up. So it was hard to broadcast.
So did you hear that sound, the
Yeah.
And then the music came
AOL. I'm sorry if you were AOL. Don't get me. Not trying to go to court. But, after that, broadband came into effect.
Right.
I was able to establish a network. It was the first internet broadcasting radio station, period, in Washington, D.C., and the whole entire region, if you will. And we became successful. Why? Because we function like an FM station. We are live. We have live on-air personality. Lee Manley's in the house. Lee, if you can raise your hand real fast. That's one of my on-air personalities. We have, it's Frank Sheffield. Frank Sheffield is in the building, and we also have Amira. Amira's in the building, too, if you can raise your hand. There you go. So we have live on-air personalities that you can actually plug in and speak to. If you want to call them, they're going to answer the phone. You ever call a radio station, they never answer the phone, trying to find out? Yeah. And we give you good information in between the music. That's what people are looking for. I think a lot of people are tired of listening to ratchet radio. And so what we've decided to do is give quality programming 24/7, 365 over the internet. That's pretty much my elevator pitch.
I love it. I don't know. First of all, I know it's not the end of the panel, but let's just give a hand to these entrepreneurs that actually have spoken so far. At MMTC, we see this all the time, but I'm always getting excited. So if I'm over here smiling ear to ear, it's because I think this kind of energy, thank you, Tom, for bringing them to Washington, D.C. for us policy wonks, right, who focus just on the policy side. Before I get to Jeannie, who is the policy wonk, who's going to talk a little bit about why they need to be concerned about policy, I think what I'm hearing from all of you, and I just want to summarize it for the group, is that one, technology was used to solve some kind of problem, and that's why you started some of your companies, that there were alternatives to the retail market space that were really important, that you needed to find and meet consumer demand, and that essentially you may have to go beyond the United States to actually make a profit when you're starting into this into the high-tech space. New technology, Jeannie, though, brings new concerns, and Jeannie comes from the Better Business Bureau, right? What should we be paying attention to when we look at these new high-tech fields in terms of the consumer privacy and safety and the other parts of it?
Okay, there's a lot. I'm not going to spend much time on regulation. I'll just make one point about that, and that is your Social Girls app is hitting girls over 12. That keeps you out of the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. However, it now doesn't get you out of the California eraser law. And this young lady is nodding her head, which means I don't have much that I have to say to her, because she already knows. She already knows, and she's well ahead of the game because she's baked in understanding privacy regulation right into what she's doing. However, you are in an area where there are privacy concerns that are not covered by regulation, because you're talking and young people may be sharing information that could be subject to some bullying issues. You might have some data security, data breach issues. You might have some sharing that's unintended. So you must have a privacy policy that must be now easy for your users to understand, and they're probably opting into it. And if you're going to go the commercial route of, do you have advertisers yet?
We don't have advertisers yet, but we are well aware of the opt-in option, and also just to be clear, I have to say this. My mother, when I first came up with this concept and idea, as a parent, she would say, well, how are you going to protect the girls, or what are you going to do? Because parents will not let children use the internet and tweet and Facebook and all of that. And so she used to send me the FCC newsletters. And she would just forward them to me randomly when they would come out. And the first thing I did was hire an intellectual property lawyer, and she walked me through the laws at that time, what we needed to do. And that's why Social Girls reaches out to girls ages 13 to 17 and not 12 or 11. So I had to be very cognizant and concerned about the girls. And the first thing we want to do, yes, we attract these young ladies to the site, but we are very well aware of the predators that will come to Social Girls with ill intent. So understanding the laws and the rules is absolutely the first thing that I invested my money with lawyers to understand.
You are so unusual.
Yes. She started with the lawyers.
I mean, most people, and I'm not saying that I understand it. You're building a new idea. You're building a wonderful technology. Why in the world would you get a privacy lawyer? It's just not what tech people think of. They think about information sharing. Mm-hmm. They think about innovation. Mm-hmm. And if you don't bake privacy in from the beginning, it's much more expensive. What if you hadn't done that and you were out there with an app that went to kids 11 and 12? The FTC could have come knocking on your door. So you saved yourself a world of grief.
Yes, my mother. Right, she played. But Jenny, this actually is a really good question. I want to throw it out to the panelists, right? Because I think that's part of what I love about this workshop is that it bridges policy and actual entrepreneurs and investors in this conversation. For the other folks, did you have to think about things like that in terms of, what are the regulatory constraints? What are the policies that are at play? Yours, really was a case in point where you had to do that due diligence. But I'm curious about the other folks. How attentive do you stay as a new entrepreneur in this space or a seasoned entrepreneur to make sure you're following the rules as you're building?
Well, I would say that is one of the first things we thought about as well. I mean, I'm a lawyer, and I used to do intellectual property law for not a lot, but a little bit, enough to know that I needed to really think about that. And there's so many new regulations. I mean, California is a perfect example of a state where the Attorney General is very activist in this area. And so it's really important to know that you have the right type of privacy policy and know, who you are, who your target audience is. So that was something that, we were kind of on top of from the beginning.
Yeah,
Yes.
and you have real concerns too, because if people are sharing information that is sensitive about privacy issues, then you're open to all kinds of things. So that's an issue. You've got some issues that are on another.
This is like the free Better Business Bureau advice. Get it all out now, Jane.
Yeah, and I'm also excited that, one of the great revenue generators is advertising.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with it. It's great. You just got to do it right.
Right.
Because you've got to give we have self-regulation. That's what I enforce. And you got to give people notice. You got to give them choice. You've got to play fair with them. And actually, certain large companies have learned that consumers want that, and they've had to retrofit a lot of privacy changes because of consumer concerns and regulator concerns. So you might grow to be as big as Facebook, but you will have a better start than they did. And it's understandable. If you're all about sharing and enabling people to share information, then thinking about their privacy isn't going to be the first thing that comes to mind. But good for both of you, and I'm just waiting to hear the rest of you, because I'm sure you're just as good.
I'd be kind of scared. Go ahead, Cleveland.
Sometimes when you start, somebody on the previous panel said you make a bunch of mistakes, and they actually want people to make mistakes because you've learned something. You don't want somebody that's green, because everybody's going to make a mistake. So I asked around. And, some people helped me. They gave me information, like your mom, gave you. People were giving me information. Joycelyn Tate was someone that was instrumental with the MMTC that helped me, move my company, along. And of course, if you do something wrong, they'll find you. They'll find you, and you get a letter in the mail if you do something wrong. But that just happens. Sometimes with my field. It's the Digital Broadcasting Act. You have to be able to be squared away with ASCAP, BMI. So I have to have licensing agreements in place for broadcasting and radio.
Yeah, this is an area. Timo, did you want to add in?
Yes, I think with software licensing, it's slightly different, right? I think you're not dealing with their data per se, right? You're selling the software and somebody's using it to do something with their data. So you have to be explicit. So we had to invest in looking at our product, what are the steps that go through the download and installation and warranties, and then you throw in the internationalization, right? I think you have U.S. laws, Canadian laws, EU laws. They are slightly different, so you have to account for the widest possible of warranties and licensing. And then when you include third-party licenses within your product, I think it gets even more complicated. There are some licensing things like Apache or LGPL and things like that you have to kind of study and understand what licensing they use, and when you include it in your product, you need to be very specific on how you use it and to what extent. So there's a lot of intricacies in that, and what we did was we hired a lawyer to kind of sit through and look at the whole process before we hit the market, not push it out and see what happens. And then kind of in terms of acceptance of legal agreement, there are some rules around that as well. Just by installing the software, do they agree to their terms? Are they by usage? Are you providing any warranties? Because if you don't explicitly state, you could be in trouble in some cases where they have used it in a certain way and they have lost money and they could come back and we could be liable for those charges. So it's better to just sit down with somebody and walk them through the steps and figure out what's the right law, licensing agreements to apply.
You've also got some breach worries if your software is open in ways that it shouldn't be, and you've been careless about that. You also, I don't know if you fall into the data processing regulations in the EU, but they are something fierce and difficult to navigate. Because you're simply the service, you may not, but if you're trying to transfer data within Europe, you do. And those are something that I wouldn't even begin to try to approach on my own. And then EU privacy regulation is very onerous. Doesn't sound like you're too much into that. So it's so far, my goodness. You didn't give me any panelists to work with.
I'm glad I didn't.
We're speaking about technology and all these apps that people create.
Right.
Is there an app to find out what type of legislation or services or clearance that you need for your particular field? I mean, if you didn't make it up,
there's an app for that, Tom.
You got that?
How do you do that? There's like an app called How Do You Do That to protect your business, right?
There is something called Privacy Choice, although I think it was bought up, and it gave you help in creating privacy policies.
Awesome.
But you got to remember, what you say depends on what you do.
That's right.
So no one can do it for you because they don't know what you're collecting. They don't know, in some ways it's very difficult. In some ways it's just common sense. Would your user, listener, licensee be surprised by anything that you're transferring or taking?
Wow.
If so, stop. Then there are all these arcane laws. A good lawyer doesn't have to be from one of the most expensive firms, but somebody who deals in these issues. There's someone in the audience that I've been co-chair of the Privacy and Data Security Committee for the Federal
Ask Janelle
Communications.
Trigg.
Ask Janelle Trigg. Ask Janelle Trigg.
That's right.
She'll help you, but I'm just really good for all of you.
That's right. Well, and I think this actually is a really great conversation, particularly for those entrepreneurs that have had these ideas, right? Because we really started with ideas, talked about protections, because every time you have an idea, you need to back up so nothing falls apart in an idea. But I think there's a third part of this discussion that we need to discuss, which is access to capital, right? And curious, I think a big how did you do that for many of us in the audience is how did you fund it? How did you finance it? Were you incubated? Did you go through an accelerator? How did you do that? So I want to go back to Tony. Did you all start? Did you go to an incubator, accelerator, access to capital? Did you start with your credit card? What did you do to actually build it to the business that's now?
I actually built it myself. For my particular opportunity in the very beginning was looking at a niche market where we were not in that space from a standpoint of being a minority. But I was very much aware of selling the opportunity and talking to these retail markets. I'll put it this way. Before we started looking at doing our self-contained integration of building systems, I went to a company that built product, and pursuing that company that integrated systems, I asked them were they in particular retail markets, and they said no. I asked them how would you like to be in those retail markets, and they were like, well, we would love to be in those opportunities, have those opportunities. So then by pursuing the retail markets, I was going out to every major retailer out there and building those relationships, because in a business world that I'm in, it's always going to be about the relationships more so than anything else. And after talking and creating a uniqueness and telling these retailers that you absolutely have nobody on your shelves that look like me. So that's added value right there. And then because I had good resources through Tom Joyner show, Tavis Smiley, and those other media outlets, reaching out to the Congressional Black Caucus, reaching out to different minority opportunities, media as well as the political side, I was able to show them value. And then what I did was, when they provided the opportunity, a lot of times they try to dictate to you what you can and can't do. But I've always been at the mindset people will only do what you allow them to do. So when they were talking about their net terms, I would tell them, look, I'm a brother. I need my money because I got to pay my vendors. And I was able to negotiate longer terms with them to be able to take and, to pay me right away. But yet on the backside, on the integration side, I was able to extend those terms out to 120 days. So I got the retailers paying me every 30, but I'm able to take and go to the integrators and pay them every 120 days. So I had 4 months afloat. But then also I took it upon myself to go to the integrators and say, I need buyback percentages. So if I pay you in 3 weeks, if I pay you in 120 days, this is only what you're going to get. But if I pay you in 3 months early, a month early, this is what I want back. 2 months early, this is what I want back. And if I pay you in 1 month early, this is what I want back. And what if I were to pay you before I get paid? I want more points back. So my percentages of profit just continuously grew because I had buybacks from them.
That's right.
So now I'm able to take and leverage the risk from me because, and this is the early stage, it ain't that way now, I own my own product now, but in the early stages, it was able to take and have them, instead of having the retailer make the check out to me, make it out to them. They got paid, then they sent me mine. Now, that builds long-term, that builds trust, that builds a relationship, but all at the same time, it increased my profit. So I didn't care, whether they got paid first or I got paid first. I was looking at the percentages of what I would get. And so I was able to leverage, what I had, what the retailers were looking for, and given the integrator at the time access into a market they didn't have access to.
And that's an interesting thing, and I want to ask other people, because I think oftentimes, particularly with minority and women-owned businesses, we get stopped, right? Because we say we don't have enough capital to start the business. And I think what we're hearing here is you may not have as much money as you want, but if you can negotiate the right terms to keep the business capitalizing off of the product, it'll feed itself. That's really interesting because not a lot of us talk about that when we talk about expanding business, right?
As well, using that model, and that's a blueprint that I started 16 years ago. Come July, it'll be 16 years. So the thing is, I go into a market and establish that blueprint. I've never owed anybody. So everything I get is straight profit.
Yeah. Other people, anybody else use an incubator or accelerator for your business, or how did you get beyond the access to capital challenge?
Well, I would say I tried to get loans. I went to Bank of America. I went to It's Wells Fargo now. What was the bank before that? Wachovia. I thought they was going to watch over you, but they didn't watch over me. They kicked me out.
This is not a commercial for Wachovia.
But the whole thing was, my market was so brand new. It was no stats. Mm-hmm. They had no history. And even Arbitron at the time was not rating us. So I didn't have anything to go on. I was basically just going in there saying that we have an awesome concept that's going to work. And they, some nice tactful words. Mm-hmm. They was like they couldn't give me a loan. So what did I do before, Bill Cunningham, I don't know if he's still here, but he was talking about crowdfunding, crowdsourcing. And, that's what allowed me to be able to get to where I needed to go. The people, the listeners, they spoke for us. The businesses, the local mom and pop businesses that can't afford to be on commercial radio. It's expensive to be on commercial radio. Mm-hmm. And we knew that. So we went to them. And that's how we were able to sustain ourselves early on. And even to this day now.
Yeah, you got creative, right? Yeah. You say you can slam the door this way, but I'll find somebody else to fund me.
Oh, we kicked the door open another way, yeah.
That's right, that's right. Anybody else in terms of how you funded your venture?
Well, we did a little bit different. We essentially self-funded where we are up to this point. But I think the key thing and the way we were able to get as far as we are is having a management team that is able to do a lot of the things that you would have to pay for. And so, for instance, I have a CTO who built the initial app for us. We have a CMO who is a social media maven, and so I think the key when you're talking about putting together a startup is really to try to find other people that don't do what you do. What you don't want to do is get someone who does what you do, because then there are going to be issues. So you want to try to get people that have a skill set that you absolutely do not have. And so then the reason that they come together is because they're willing to put their sweat equity in. And so my CTO was willing to build the app without us having to pay him. You know, my social media person is willing to do a lot of the social media work. And so I think that particularly in the African American community and women, where we may not have that friends and family access that can write that, you know, $100,000 to $250,000 check just out of their free cash flow. And so you really need to think of creative ways to get, especially if it's a product that you're doing, to get that product done, but to have people who are getting something out of it. So that's what we did, and we're now at the angel stage in terms of, you know, looking for the, you know, the early stage venture money.
Marissa? Well, Social Girls is still seeking funding. We are, sweat equity is a prime example of how Social Girls even survives this far. My team is awesome, ranging from individuals in Los Angeles to New Orleans. They learned about what we were trying to do and how we were trying to reach the demographic. And so we did a crowdsource funding campaign, and I tapped all the friends and families and other cousins and other folks. Also, I'm not a part of any incubator, but I feel like I've created my own kind of incubator and my own group of folks. My tech solution partner, Clearly Innovative, Aaron Saunders, listened to my story, and he wanted to make sure that he was able to provide the technology that we needed to showcase Social Girls to the young ladies. So we have a very strong partnership, and now I have this technology backing this great brand, and individuals who write the content for the website and for the app. That's where I'm getting most of the investment now, and the team understands and knows that it will pay off soon. But we realize that, you know, we don't have the funding right now, but we definitely have the support, and that's what keeps us motivated and even moving forward. Because if I can get an Aaron Saunders and someone to write in Los Angeles and in New York, then clearly we're doing something right.
Well, this is broadcast live, so you just put your message out there. But I think that's a really interesting comment, I think, for all of you that are out there. I mean, we do have a challenge. I would be remiss at the work that we do at MMTC and the partnerships that we have with other civil rights groups around angel investing and what that looks like in terms of representation. I mean, we really have a long way to go to get to that stage. But I think what's so important, though, is the idea, right, and the protections that we talked about so far. Because once you do bring it to market, it's just what Cleveland said, when the consumers speak, that's when you actually kick the brand off even more. So for anybody that's listening and watching, it's so important to keep kicking down those doors. Because if you stop kicking down the doors, then you actually kill off the dream that you had and the idea that you had to keep moving forward. Now, we have questions from the audience. I had a couple other questions, but I want to make sure we answer some of these questions that have just come to me. What are some of the considerations to take into account when looking to go global? And I think this applies to everybody, right? At the end of the day, what's so special about technology is that it breaks down, you know, these geographic boundaries and walls so that you can actually take your product to market there. So I'll start with you, Timo, in terms of that.
I think you first need to focus on, you know, where if you're writing a program or a software or app in English, right? I think focus on your English-speaking countries, because I think that itself is a big mass of folks. You're basically looking at US, UK, Canada, Australia, Ireland. I mean, there's any number of countries wherever the British were. I mean, people are going to speak English. So you know that market, South Africa, a lot of countries in the Southeast Asian area. If you are planning to kind of go into, you know, South America or some of the European countries, you have to pay particular attention to, you know, what is it that you're going to be providing in terms of internationalization. Is it just your product? Is it your documentation? Is it your support? Because we have looked into various options, because once you start providing the product in a different language, even if it's just a different screen, then you have to support them in that language. That really has, you know, put the brakes on us to say, I don't have people who speak French or German or any other language to be responding to an email or, you know, picking up a call in that language. So you really have to weigh the pros and cons. What does that market look like? Is it really worth the investment of spending $5 or $10 or $20,000 to be putting into internationalization or localization in terms of either putting out a Spanish-related app or some other type of apps? So that is a big consideration. I think you really have to work that out to see if your product is valid in terms of that. Some of the larger softwares that kind of are being deployed there, they have the resources and the money to be spending a Spanish version or a Italian or a German or any of those versions. So you see that typically in Microsoft or Google or some of these large companies where they have to be in that market. Plus, EU may have its own specific considerations in terms of legality, so you have to watch out for that as well. So personally, I think you really have to first look at what your cost benefits are before you jump into that areas. The other piece is the challenges with selling, right? Even if I could give that software to that country, there are some challenges in terms of taking money from them, like how is that transaction going to look like? So for example, if you look at Brazil, I know there's a lot talked about Brazil, but there are a lot of challenges in terms of doing business there, in terms of selling something there, in terms of a download. In some countries, they cannot even use their card online, or maybe cannot even send a wire transfer the money in terms of payment. So there are a lot of challenges in terms of how do you take that money, right? And how do you account for that? Plus, again, there are legalities with that in each country. If you have to face a lawsuit in that country, will you be able to manage that? I think that's a big consideration as well.
So, Jeannie, I was going to go to you. Anything we need to worry about internationally in terms of regulation and policy?
Yes.
I knew it.
Yeah, it depends what you're doing.
Right.
But any kind of data transfer, any kind of privacy issue, particularly in the EU and now increasingly in Latin America, which is adopting EU-style regulation, you do have to look at the kind of opt-in consents that disclosure of any tracking, rules around data transfers, any security breach notification laws, some of which are just being developed. And then, of course, completely out of my sphere, all the intellectual property issues that you need to think about to protect you. But it really depends on what are you selling, what are you offering as a service, and are you going to have a home base in one of these other countries? And if so, you do want to pick the one that has the most liberal regime. A lot of companies put their home base in Ireland if they're going to sell in Europe, for example, for very good reasons. They certainly would not go to Germany first in terms of privacy laws because of German sensitivities over privacy.
Yeah, and these are real concerns. I mean, I do some research on that, and there are concerns based on where you're based and what taxation and other rules actually apply. So again, you can do it, but be protected, right, while you do it.
And some of the business, one business that I was just looking at here was fabulous in that it was geared to offer products to different countries. But I would assume that they have some sort of corresponding relationship with someone based in that country, which can be invaluable in making sure you can navigate all these regulations.
That's right. So I have a question for you for IM4 Radio, and it actually is a question I think applies to everybody. How do you figure out what audiences want to hear?
Okay. We basically, I mean, like I said before, we was not rated or recognized by Arbitron. So we had to pretty much come up with our own type of system, to find out who's listening, how long they're listening, where are they listening. So one of the, I guess it's not an app, it's a service. I guess I can plug on. I don't know if but it's a SurveyMonkey. We use SurveyMonkey. Yeah. And we said, thank you. When Jeannie said I did something great, I did something great. So we use SurveyMonkey to find out, who's listening, and we sent that out to our base. I mean, we capture people's emails, and we found out who was listening. We asked them, what shows did they like, what did they not like, how long did they listen, and that's how we established our data early on, and we actually still use that to this day. I mean, I think Arbitron is now, starting to rate us. I mean, we're turning the corner as far as the internet broadcasting industry goes. But that's pretty much how we collected our information. I mean, when we went out, we're out in the streets. We're a radio station, so we're very local. We're kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to globalization. We're local. We have a certain brand of programming. I mean, of course, music is the universal language, but we are soul, R&B, jazz, funk, and a little bit of hip hop. So we're out in the community. So we know who our audience is because we see them. They're right in our face. We're connecting with them. We're having conversations with them.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Marissa.
Well, we've had several focus groups because we were trying to figure out just who is that social girl, and we've gone to several schools, churches, and not just in Washington, D.C., but in New Orleans, in Los Angeles, and we didn't use SurveyMonkey, but we did. We asked the girls several questions of just what did they want to see in an app, and just what would they like to do using modern technology. And that's how we were able to identify our demographic and kind of narrow in and say, well, we want to make sure the girls have access to education. Once we did a research, we found out that African American girls' number one search is education. Not hair, not fashion, not beauty, it's education. So we wanted to make sure that when we develop this app, we have an education component where they can learn when they should take their SATs or study habits or things of that nature. So we went out in the community, local and far, to make sure that we were targeting and tailoring the product to our demographic.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have an interesting challenge because we're, on the one hand, a B2B, business-to-business model, but on the other hand, we're a B2C, business-to-consumer model. And so on the B2B side, we have been very involved, as I said, with some of the White House initiatives in terms of sexual assault on college campuses. So that has given us an opportunity to really understand what the issues are for a segment of our business market, which are the universities. On the B2C level, we have done a lot of outreach to student groups. We have a number of initiatives around sexual assault. We've worked a lot with fraternities, sororities, various student groups. And so that's how we're getting a lot of the information in terms of what would they really like to see on an app. So we've done it's sort of a really very much a grassroots approach. And that's, again, for both of the B2B as well as the B2C market.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a consistent theme, right? I mean, for technology, what's nice about it, I'm going to date myself, but back in the days before hip-hop and rap came out, the way that people got the word about it was through people selling CDs in the barbershop and on the corner, right? And the more CDs and that you sold, the more that you got recognized to actually sign with the label.
Mixtapes.
Yeah, mixtapes, right? Not the ratchet ones, but mixtapes nonetheless. But I think that speaks to, again, for all of you folks that are in here trying to hit into the high-tech market, what's so beautiful about the internet, it's all about consumer demand. And the internet has been designed as this ecosystem that's very contributory, which is why we often get in trouble, because people actually lean towards those things they want to see, hear, experience, and engage with. So I think these are really interesting things. You've got to know your audience, which are basic traditional business principles. Now, we have 5 minutes. I have this one question, and there's always this question at the end of business panels like, what would you do differently, right? Man, that's always a question. I don't want to ask that question. What I want to ask all of you to answer, and Jeannie, I'm just trying to figure out how to wrap you in so we can end on a high note when it comes to protections. But I'll ask you this as well. If you could go back when you first thought about launching your company, what's one piece of advice that you wish someone had given you? One piece of advice in hindsight that you wish somebody would have given you. So, Jeannie, when you respond, I want you to give like that universal advice that everybody should know, that somebody should have given. Why don't we start with you? What's the one thing, one piece of advice, and listening to these great panelists today that you think they should have gotten if they didn't get it already?
Just because you can doesn't mean you should. If a warning bell sounds in your head, stop.
All right, Cleveland, we'll go to you.
I'm going to say hire the qualified help, the right help. A lot of times when you first start a business, I mean, you're just really trying to move things forward. And, you know, a lot of times you think that you're trying to bring someone on board that can work for you. I mean, your budget speaks for who you're going to hire. And a lot of times you wear a lot of hats in your organization when you start. I mean, I was everything. You know, I was the person that ran and got food, and I was the CEO and the on-air personality and everything else. I did a lot, but when you expand, you have to, it's the help that's going to get you where you're going. You know, nobody has done anything by themselves. And, you know, for me, I made some mistakes with just trying to move things forward too fast with the incorrect people. So I would say certainly, you know, take your time and really find out, you know, who's going to push your business forward. Because, I mean, you're going to end up doing the work anyway if you don't find the right person or the right help.
Timo?
I think from my standpoint, I think don't follow the status quo. That is the biggest thing I would say, because there's all this established models and frameworks and business models and revenue models and whatnot. So when you are trying to innovate, just don't even think about it. Just think, here's my model. Test your way. Obviously, you can talk to customers, and customers are looking at what is in it for them in terms of the product, and they are willing to go out of that model, what is established, and, you know, they will work with you. So that's just
Lisa?
I don't know. It's a hard one. I would say probably just don't be afraid to pivot, you know, to make a definitive decision to go in a different way, even if it's not what you thought it was originally going to be. So I would say that would be it.
I actually have two, because I'm still learning. I'm trying to figure this out. I think the first one would be no. It's not necessarily no. It just means not right now. I think as entrepreneurs and people that really are passionate about their product, you don't want to hear no, but it's okay to hear no. And I think the second thing is what you said earlier about having people work with you. I had my college classmate who's still with me on my team, but she's been with me the whole way. And not only is she a teammate, she's my sister, and we can have different conversations that everyone else on the team cannot necessarily have. And being a leader and a CEO, you'd have to find balance. So I think the advice would be to make sure that you have someone who can help you find balance with your team. Tony.
Wow, that's a good one. 16 years of doing this. I would say that that in life you have to be a risk taker. You know, why be afraid to go out on a limb, especially when that is where the fruit is at? And I say that because sometimes we get so complacent in doing your business that sometimes you find that it's challenging and hard, and you don't want to take those chances, but you have to. And I say that in a reference to Mr. Reed. I greatly appreciate Mr. Reed and his staff and Gil for what they have done, because last time I was in this room, and this is the risk that you take, last time I was in this room, I was sitting where you were at. A lot of people didn't know what I do because I promote my product, not me. I'm not caught up in who I am and what I do. I just do what I do. But they had a panel of the telecoms that were the top 5 telecoms, the Sprint, the AT&Ts, Verizon, Microsoft, and Sprint. And his staff, we had these segments where we got a chance to talk to them for a short period of time. And in the midst of talking to them in those 20, 30 minutes time, my company itself walked out with several new opportunities, and 2 weeks from now, we fly to Dallas to meet with AT&T at the senior vice president level. We fly to Chicago to meet with U.S. Cellular at the vice president level. We go to Kansas City to meet with Sprint, which we've been out there several times, and then we go out to meet with Microsoft because of what we bring into the table and the uniqueness. So I personally will definitely owe the FCC and its leadership and Mr. Reed a great deal of gratitude because companies like mine are where we at because people that came before me paved the way. I would not be able to have these opportunities if your grandparents and great-grandparents and even some of the peers that are my age didn't pave the way. So I look at it from a standpoint that in these types of settings, we need to take and leverage off each other. We need to help each other. My objective in coming here was to meet people. When I first got in here, I didn't stand at my table. I took my business card and went around to every last table, introduced myself, found out what they did, gave them my card. And the reason why is that Mr. Cleveland said that we should be kicking down doors. Well, some of the doors are already kicked down. I kicked down Walmart door. I kicked down QVC door. I kicked down Staples, Office Depot. So for me, I'm looking at these apps, and I've talked to people where you don't have to kick down a door, because if I'm in there, I can put your app at burn-in at the factory. So now, therefore, you in those channels as well. So, and it works so vice versa, because it adds value to what I have, but yet at the same time, in order for people to use your apps, they're going to need some of these products that are on that table right there. So it's a win-win in being able to develop these relationships where they extend beyond you getting a business card that's going to go back and get put in a drawer and you absolutely never look at it again because you didn't take your notes, you didn't write down the things of detail that matters. My grandfather used to say that you got to see beyond what is visible for the eyes to see and hear beyond what is being said. So that means you pay attention to the details. And so I appreciate this panel. I appreciate everyone that I had the opportunity to meet. But if you have a product that you feel that is commercial enough and falling in line with Ms. Jeannie's recommendations of policy and procedures, because even though I'm in the hardware side, I still have to follow guidelines. So I'm interested in those types of relationships because we need to leverage each other, our talents, our skills, and our abilities. Thank you.
I just wanted to add on real fast.
Okay, now you gotta hurry up, now get me out of time.
60 seconds.
Okay.
When he spoke with passion.
Yes.
He really meant what he said.
That's right.
And I just wanted to add on with that. When some people go into business with an idea that I'm just going to do something because I know it works. It's going to make me money. But I went into the radio business because I love music. And it's going to get hard in your business. It's going to be tough times. I mean, I spent the many nights at the radio station when my car broke down. I was in the radio station trying to make this thing grow. That's passion. I mean, if you don't love it, I would have been walked out and left a long time ago. So, I mean, my advice to anybody is to love what you do what you love.
That's right. So I have to stop because Tom Reed, he likes me now, but he may not like me in a few minutes if we go into the next session. But I want to say, first of all, the panel started with, how did you do that? Let's give these panelists a round of applause that we are glad that they did that. Very glad. And I want to say to all of you as we get ready to go on the next panel, just keep the statistic in mind. The media and telecom makes up 1/6 of the economy. So what that actually suggests to all of you that are here, get to know these people, get to know each other, get to know the FCC and the great work that ACBO is doing, organizations that partner with ACBO like NMTC. And let's do this again so that the next person that's out there is on the panel. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.